there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's amore. When the world seems to shine like you've had too much wine, that's amore.
Locked and loaded once again atop the Murchison Building in downtown Wilmington, overlooking Battleship, North Carolina. You're tuned in to the Big Talker, 106.7 FM. We are 7 minutes past the top of the hour. Our call-in number is 910-299-7535 if you'd like to join the show here until 10 o'clock. Our live audio feed of the broadcast available, as always, at BigTalkerFM.com. Video portion of the show up and running this morning if you'd like to take a look at this beautiful mug, along with the amazing sights of southeastern North Carolina, thanks to a few of our friends, courtesy over at WWAY. We tap into their beach cam over Pleasure Island and the Surf Checks cam along the Cape Fear River here in downtown Wilmington. Find us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, and you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram as well. So our Commander-in-Chief, the fearless leader of our nation, the 46th President of the United States. Some call him Grandpa Joe. Others call him Creepy Joe. He may be known as Joe Keeps Forgetting That He Is President of the United States. Joe Pay Attention Biden. Lunch Bucket Joe, as he was once known. You know, a man of the people, a man of the working class. Though he's never really had a job in the real world. Some 47 years in Washington, D.C., insulated from, day-to-day grind that you're setting out on to begin your Wednesday morning here on this 7th day of July, 2021. Well, our 46th President of the United States announces yesterday that he and his administration are ready to go neighborhood by neighborhood. And oftentimes, and this is a direct quote, I mind you, oftentimes door to door, literally knocking on doors to get people vaccinated for the BS COVID-19 Chinese Communist virus. Of course, the variants remain in the news. What is there now? The Delta variant. Not really sure how they came up with that name or who, in fact, has run into the variant that appears, according to, the experts in our government, appears to be wreaking havoc in places around the world and in certain regions of our country. And also the Lambda variant. I don't know about you, but I guess as a child of the 90s, the late 80s into the 90s, anytime I hear the word Lambda, I think of the movie Revenge of the Nerds. Remember the Tri-Lambs? Lambda, Lambda, Lambda? Our 46th President of the United States ready to go take communities across the country by storm, neighborhood by neighborhood, oftentimes door to door, literally knocking on doors to get people vaccinated. That was from the mouth of our fearless Commander-in-Chief, Grandpa Joe Biden, the 46th President of the United States, confirming yesterday that he literally wants to go door to door to get people vaccinated. I wanted to start this show off on a positive note. I had all intents and purposes of running a story here this morning to kick off the broadcast that shows, in fact, a trend that we're seeing a bit of a reversal. For the first time in some 30 years, according to the latest census numbers, of course, the census numbers that remain delayed in certain areas of the country, which has prevented local elections from moving forward in areas such as Wake County and elsewhere throughout the Tar Heel State, for example. But the U.S. Census Bureau actually showcasing the fact that children growing up in two-parent households has seen an increase in percentages for the first time in 3 decades. That's a good, positive way to kick off the program. But in watching part of this news conference yesterday, at least getting the cliff notes, because it's very difficult to pay attention for the entirety of a Joe Biden speech. Granted, it lasts only 6 or 7 minutes because you give him too far of a rope and you see him kind of veer off the path very quickly, or having to once again refer to his little cheat sheet and his note card inside the lapel of his sport jacket, confirming yesterday he wants to go door to door to get people vaccinated. My question to you, whether or not you have been vaccinated, or no matter what your stance is on the entire vaccination layout for the BS COVID-19 Chinese Communist virus. Recently, of course, celebrated my 1-year anniversary of surviving as a generally healthy middle-aged man who has a 98.9% chance of surviving this virus. That is in speaking for myself, of course. My question to you is, if a government Biden bureaucrat knocks on your door and requests information as far as your vaccination goes, what do you do?
We are continuing to wind down the mass vaccination sites that did so much in the spring to rapidly vaccinate those eager to get their first shot, and their second shot for that matter, if they needed a second. Now we need to go to community by community, neighborhood by neighborhood, and oftentimes door to door, literally knocking on doors, to get help to the remaining people protected from the virus.
To get help to the remaining people who need to be protected from the virus. So that's what they're going to call it, a way for the government to keep you safe and sound. They'll be coming door to door, in fact, to get people vaccinated. And coming soon, Johnny, 3 squares a day, government set wages, and behind door number 3, well, an 800 square foot affordable living quarter for you and your family. And right around your neighborhood, you'll have access to community showers and johns, just like the dorms in the old college days. Before, of course, the colleges went the way of luxury condos, built-in pools, master bedroom suites with your own shower and john, alongside 3 other master bedroom amenities that are included in one living quarter for you to send your kid to school for, well, $30,000 a year. Part of the reason why college tuition has skyrocketed. The amenities and the standards that your spoiled kids need in order to go to school has changed drastically over the last 25, 30 years. To help get to the people who need to be protected from the virus. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say my assumption is that at this point, if folks have not yet taken the necessary steps to receive a shot in the arm to protect yourself against the BS COVID-19 Chinese Communist virus, my thought at this point in the game, 7 months since the vaccine really began to roll out in masses, my thought would be those folks are going to remain on the sidelines until further notice. But not if the Harris-Biden administration has anything to say about it, based on some of the comments made by our commander-in-chief on Tuesday. we are ready to go neighborhood by neighborhood and oftentimes door to door, literally knocking on doors to get people vaccinated for the COVID virus. And for most people, they're A-OK. In that, I had a buddy of mine put out some thoughts through social media yesterday, coming to the conclusion in his 60s that he has seen pretty much all he needs to see about when it comes to the current state of our society and large masses of people within our population who are okay with this way of life where, well, if you can order food on a phone, it gets delivered to you through what, DoorDash? You've got your favorite Netflix series on. You have no real qualms with academia, the elites, and the government bureaucrats running your day-to-day life. You obviously see that in the ways in which Americans are refusing to go back to work. In fact, in 4 states, they have decided to file lawsuits against their respective state governments for pulling their representation out of the federal unemployment benefits program that has provided $300 extra a week in places like Texas, Maryland, and 2 others, I believe, Indiana. And 1 other state, citizens in these states have actually sued their respective states because of the decision to pull out of the federal unemployment assistance program that provided the extra $300 a week from the start of the pandemic. Of course, we know Governor Cooper, back on Friday, the king of tyranny, vetoed a piece of legislation that would have pulled North Carolina out of the program. Amid a record number of job openings, thousands of Americans are now suing Republican governors for opting out of enhanced federal unemployment benefits. As we continue to move through this mess of a situation that was created by government and government only in regards to the pandemic and the shutdown, it is becoming increasingly clear that too many Americans, led by the activist press and the Democratic Party, are willing to do anything to keep in power. Of course, these Democrats, along with their strong-arm wing in the press, they're willing, the American citizens are, to accept, well, again, having DoorDash delivering your meals, some Netflix, and so long as no one rocks the boat in exchange for others telling them what to do or how to live, they're A-OK with allowing others, particularly the government elites, those in academia, they are A-OK with allowing those folks who live better lives than anyone in the general population, of course. They're okay with those folks directing traffic so long as you have your DoorDash and your Netflix. Evidence to prove so, of course, well, in Indiana, Maryland, and Texas, residents are now filing lawsuits to restore the federal handouts that dozens of states have already opted out of, as we saw in the latest jobs report for the month of June. The Republican governors are the ones, of course, saving the economy by cutting off extra unemployment benefits. We saw 850,000 jobs return to the economy in June, which was over expectations, a good thing. And a large reason why, once again, Republican governors deciding to cut themselves off of the extra unemployment benefits that have been provided by the federal government. State Treasurer Dale Folwell going to join us just after 8 o'clock this morning, as he does twice a month on Wednesdays. The Treasurer has been in a long battle with hospital networks and the healthcare system over his efforts in the past few years to represent the hundreds of thousands of state employees and retirees who access health care through what is known as the state health plan. He has wanted and has called for more transparency within the system, particularly when it came to hidden prices, the rise of all sorts of costs related to the ways in which you consume health care, and he's been met with a dead-end sign every route he is trying to take in order to hold some of these hospitals and healthcare systems accountable for the way in which they provide healthcare to you, the consumer. Patients expecting hospitals to make their prices publicly available remain out of luck, despite a new federal price transparency regulation that went into effect at the beginning of the year. Under Obamacare, it requires hospitals to post prices of their services. And in November of 2019, the Trump administration issued regulations under Obamacare that require hospitals to post the prices of the 300 common services in a file that can be downloaded from their websites. The prices that must be displayed according to the government regulation include the gross charge for service, the price a cash paying patient would pay, and the rates negotiated with insurers. This is something Treasurer Folwell had done a few years prior to the new Trump administration regulation building off of Obamacare that would have brought, some openness into the system. That regulation went into effect on January 1st, and what the Journal of the American Medical Association has found is that over half of hospitals across America have not provided downloadable files or have been non-compliant in some other way. You have to ask yourself why. Well, State Treasurer Dale Folwell will give you a little reminder as to the response he received when he went down this dusty road a couple of years back. We look forward to speaking with Treasurer Dale Folwell in just a little while, along with Professor David Azzerad of Hillsdale College, a faculty member at Hillsdale. Today, he will offer a direct contrast to the academic ideas espoused by the 1619 Project. This piece of garbage that has been pushed by the Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist Nicole Hannah-Jones, who took UNC Chapel Hill to lunch and left him in the dust. Professor Azzerad of Hillsdale College will provide direct contrast to some of the basic tenets of this distortion of history that has been lifted up and put on a pedestal by the elites in academia and the mainstream news media, as well as, many in the administrative state within our school systems throughout America. We'll hear a rebuttal to what was laid out in that documentation a few years ago that lifted Nicole Hannah-Jones to prominence to a point where, a very successful minority woman had the ability to manipulate the conversation to the point where it seemed as if, of course, anyone who disagreed with the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist was, of course, a racist and probably a sexist, not just in disagreement with some of her theories and ideas. It all has to go back to identity politics and not a healthy debate on the ideas that you're pushing, because those sorts of things are just second fiddle. Well, we have to first, of course, get through the whole racial and sexist portion of the conversation before we can actually hash out some of the theories and ideas that you want to espouse and push on our kids, while you're making hundreds of thousands of dollars with no real accountability through what is known as tenure. UNC Chapel Hill was made to look a fool over the last few days. There's nothing wrong with questioning, particularly when one of the major donors to your school has questions about the credentials, the qualifications, the theories, and ideas of someone you're about to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of a 5-year period. It all had to do, of course, under her eyes, with race and gender, and nothing to do with the, of course, meat of what she has pushed throughout the country over the last several years in what is known as the 1619 Project. I think the folks over at Chapel Hill should thank their lucky stars, along with North Carolina taxpayers and anyone who sends their kid to Chapel Hill, particularly those who study communications and journalism. Nonetheless, Professor David Azzerad of the Hillsdale College faculty will offer direct contrast this morning to the academic ideas pushed in the 1619 Project. He joins our show in 1 hour from now. Also, Corey DeAngelis of the Reason Foundation, the Cato Institute, outspoken advocate for school choice in our country. He'll be back with us with news that the National Educators Association is getting behind this idea of critical race theory, along with the nation's largest teacher union debating on whether or not they will call for mandatory vaccinations and testing for all students and staff before returning to face-to-face instruction for the upcoming academic year in the traditional public schools. Lots going on the educational front. Of course, we will highlight that thoroughly here this morning with Professor Azzerad and Corey DeAngelis, who's set to join the show just after 9:30. Your calls at 910-299-7535.
We don't need no education. We don't need no thought control. No dark sarcasm in the classroom. Teacher, leave them kids alone.
As Wilmington's leader in restorative and regenerative medicine, the Frank Institute specializes in health optimization. Simply put, we use in-depth evaluations and lab testing to determine the best treatments for each patient. So whether you're suffering from an unseen hormonal imbalance or a simple vitamin deficiency, the Frank Institute is ready to get you back to better living. Call us at 910-679-8534 or fill out our symptom survey online at frankinstitute.com. Because at the Frank Institute, you live, we help.
Folks, we all know ongoing road construction and traffic can weigh heavy on your vehicle. Since 2006, O'Leary's Automotive Repair has provided comprehensive repair services at affordable prices to get you back on the road in no time. Their ASE certified technicians will help you find a cost-effective repair and maintenance alternatives. O'Leary's has multiple locations in the area in Hampstead, Leland, the Myrtle Grove area, Ogden, and Wrightsboro. O'Leary's Automotive Repair, a trusted, locally owned business since 2006.
I'm K.O. Davis from K.O.'s Coast to Coast Tree, and I want to be your tree man.
When your trees need cut, 2 letters to know. One is a K, the other is an O. K.O.
Tree man. Proper trimming is the most important thing that you can do, so don't just hire anybody to do it. You need someone that knows what they're doing.
K.O.
Call the professionals at K.O.'s Coast to Coast Tree and visit KOTrees.com.
Hello, I'm Jeff Rivenbark with WWAY News. Elsa weakened to a tropical storm as it threatened Florida's northern Gulf Coast this morning after raking past the Tampa Bay region. A hurricane warning was in effect for a long stretch of coastline from Edgemont Key at the mouth of Tampa Bay to the Salinahatchee River in the Big Bend area. There were no immediate reports of damage or injuries in the Tampa Bay area, which is highly vulnerable to storm surge. The most powerful winds were forecast to remain offshore. In Brunswick County, a man has died while swimming at Bald Head Island. Public safety officers were dispatched to beach access number 15 near Snowy Egret Trail around 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon. They found a 55-year-old man who had been pulled from the water. Attempts to resuscitate were unsuccessful. The man's name has not been released at this time. Lots of people have been at the beaches this weekend. Wrightsville Beach Ocean Rescue reported about 3 dozen rip current rescues yesterday. While lifeguards are there to assist when needed, not every beach town in the Cape Fear has them. And as Elsa approaches the Cape Fear, swimmers are urged to take heed. If the flag posted is green, you can get in the water. If it's yellow, stay knee-deep. If you see red flags, stay out of the water. Happening this morning at 10 o'clock, Governor Roy Cooper will again draw names for the winners of the COVID-19 vaccine lottery. $1 million is up for grabs for adults who have been vaccinated. Students who got their shots can win a $125,000 college scholarship. The last drawing winners were Shelley Raymond of Winston-Salem and 14-year-old Vanya Martinez of Wilmington. After today's drawing, there are 2 more chances to win. For more on these stories, head over to WWAYTV3.com. I'm Jeff Rivenbark. Have a great day.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm WWAY meteorologist Ramel Carpenter with the Storm Track 3 forecast. Well, one more fairly quiet day across the Cape here, although it's going to be hot and humid once again with temperatures getting back into the upper 80s, low 90s. Coastal areas will top off in the middle 80s this afternoon, and we do have a chance for scattered showers and storms to set up as we get towards midday into the early afternoon hours. But tonight, temperatures will be dropping down into the middle and upper 70s with the breeze starting to pick up ahead of Tropical Storm Elsa. Get your full forecast on WWAY and WWAYTV3.com.
This news and weather is brought to you by Two Men and a Truck. For your free quote, go to twomenandatruck.com. twomenandatruck.com.
All right, as we move through the first hour of our program, as you heard Jeff Rivenbark, Ramel Carpenter over at WWAY. Yeah, it's hurricane season, folks, and the amount of coverage, a tropical storm off the Gulf of Florida that we're receiving here on the North Carolina coast is enough for 35 seconds, and we'll move on. Folks, we live next to the ocean, in a place known as the Atlantic Hurricane Zone. There's a reason why the United States has its shape along the Atlantic seaboard from Florida up towards us here in the Cape Fear region. And I get it. Lots of folks moving in, not accustomed to dealing with storms and storm season, and we should always be prepared and have, our preparedness set this time of year, particularly as you move into August and then in September when it really ramps up. But enough of the coverage for a tropical system that, is going to bring some rainfall, but looking at some of the models, SpaghettiModels.com is the website I use. It gives you all of the models lined up for you, nice and easy to read and see. And this thing is going to cruise once it does make land and cruise through 3 other states before it gets to North Carolina. Still yet dumping rainfall, stirring up the Atlantic Ocean. By the way, the ocean over the course of the holiday weekend, well, at least at Wrightsville and then moving up towards Lee Island where I was on Monday, we had at Wrightsville some 6 to 8 foot swells. They were fun body surfing waves, but no doubt if you're an inexperienced swimmer or you feel that well, rough seas are not necessarily your forte to be able to swim and cut through the ocean like Luca the sea monster, then, well, stay out of the water. Go in, as Jeff said, knee high. I mean, it's some common sense, folks out there. Let's use it, particularly when it comes to your life, your child's life, a loved one's life, because the Atlantic has no mercy, as you know and have seen over the course of history living here along the North Carolina coastline. But rain, and it looks like this thing's going to stay more towards the central part of the state, I-95 corridor likely to get hit with rain tomorrow into Thursday, and we'll get some rainfall. Enough. Spend 2 minutes on it this morning. I'd rather you talk, I'd talk to you about the over 230 people who were shot over the Independence Day holiday weekend within the urban sprawl across our country. Some 24 in New York, dozens more in Chicago, typical weekend in the Windy City. And since, the media and the Democrat Party loves to politicize every time there's violence in the streets, particularly involving a police officer or a so-called white supremacist, it becomes the top story across all of the news networks. The talking points get distributed into the inboxes of the news anchors throughout newsrooms in America, and then the same points are regurgitated one after another over and over and over again, and the record goes on repeat for about 72 hours, and then as, details of the story surface, if it in fact does fit the narrative, it then becomes the central focus for weeks upon weeks. If it doesn't, it disappears in the night very quickly. I'm wondering how many NRA members and legal gun owners were involved in those 200-plus shootings across the country over the Independence Day weekend. Or were there any police-related shootings to politicize? Because we would have heard it by now. Yet not one major news outlet focused on, the typical violence that we have seen across the country day after day, week after week for over a year now. The Emmy Award-winning governor up in New York State, reminder, a guy who set policies in place that sent sick old people back to nursing homes with COVID, leading to massive spread within long-term care facilities and retirement homes, and maybe a direct result of the massive death toll that New York experienced through the pandemic. That was that man's policy, the governor of the Empire State, who then, while watching these policies play out in real time, then decided to get with a publisher and write a book where he made $5 million. This man has now declared a state of emergency because of gun violence in New York. I asked the question again, when we talk about the over 24 shootings in New York City alone over the Independence Day weekend, how many of these shootings were committed by a legal gun owner or, say, an NRA member? Or were any of these shootings, did any of these shootings involve a police officer? Well, not from what we can gather, yet somehow, some way, this state of emergency is in place, which then puts into question all of the people who take the sacred responsibility of legal gun ownership seriously. Well, then it puts, once again, you in the crosshairs of this government idea to put a pretty good and hefty set of regulations on your ability to legally possess and own a firearm. Over 230 people shot over the Independence Day holiday weekend in just a handful of cities, where, by the way, when we talk about gun violence overall and how it's blows many other countries out of the water when it comes to the number of shootings that we see year after year. Well, these are concentrated, of course, in like 6 or 7 densely populated urban areas. We're not seeing, of course, the average hunter in Montana, say, go on a shooting spree on a day-to-day basis the way we do, in the south side of Chicago on any given Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, as indicated, of course, by news reports. But if you go out on a limb and, question or levy some criticisms to those in charge, particularly in a place like Chicago, well, you're deemed a sexist and a racist because the mayor of Chicago happens to be a black American whom is a female. Those were her words. If you criticize me, you're racist and a sexist because I'm black and a female. Similarly to the discussion we're having, of course, surrounding the Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist Nicole Hannah-Jones, who played UNC Chapel Hill like a fiddle, brought attention to a story that I don't know if it needed attention in the first place. Easily turning the tables, as Democrats and progressives typically do, utilizing the press to say, hey, look at all these Looney Tune conservatives out there who are upset with the fact that I'm going to receive hundreds of thousands of dollars annually through a 5-year contract along with tenure to push a theory that is riddled with inaccuracies and misconceptions. Though at a place of higher learning, this is where ideas and conversations are debated and should be had on our universities and college campuses. Yet it only seems as if one track of a mindset is allowed to espouse these views on our college campuses. In fact, several activists who are extremely upset with the way Chapel Hill handled the situation surrounding Nicole Hannah-Jones have now issued a list of demands to the Board of Trustees. They would like to go back to times that, well, many of us thought we've gotten over, particularly when it comes to who can speak and when and where on our universities and college campuses. One of the demands that some of these activists want to have put in place is a speaker ban on college campuses. So they move forward with demands that, are in direct conflict with some of the comments they make in reaction to the decision made by Nicole Hannah-Jones. They claim that it was conservatives who were questioning the idea to give this woman tenure, and that they were doing so because, well, they're racist and sexist. Yet they want to turn around and then demand that these college campuses ban anyone and everything that may question their ideas, theories, and ways of life. This is the purpose of these college campuses and universities, to have a mountain and plethora of ideas, theories, and viewpoints that are debated and are hashed out and are criticized, which is something, of course, that Professor Mike Adams over at UNCW always encouraged, despite his deep-rooted beliefs that went against the grain on our local campus. That was the mountain that ultimately, well, unfortunately, he died on, was one where he was frankly A-OK with your opinions on the issues of the day. He gave his, but he also encouraged, particularly his students and young people, to do your research, to qualify the things that you were going to say before you brought them to the debate. But never would, of course, espouse or lay it out like many in our upper levels of education do, where it's sort of my way or the highway. You believe in this, And that's what will get you, of course, well, good grades, a degree, and a mindset that, well, maybe your parents and family members and friends never thought that you'd be steered towards growing up with a good foundation and background and head on your shoulders, but quickly turned on a swivel when the same talking points are regurgitated day after day, week after week, semester after semester, without any qualification or questioning of these certain beliefs. An example of this, well, Democrats, along with their co-conspirators in the media, a few weeks ago, immediately criticized the spending proposal that was put forth by Republicans in the North Carolina General Assembly in terms of the budget. Headline from WRAL: Senate budget shorts North Carolina teacher worker raises in favor of tax cuts. Well, you can make the argument, of course, if you're lowering the state income tax rate, that impacts everyone, including teachers and workers, which then essentially would give you a raise. The progressive publication known as Carolina Forward. Just so we're clear, they're choosing to shortchange your kid's teacher so they can abolish state taxes for McDonald's and Amazon. That's in regards to a plan that has been put forth by lawmakers in Raleigh that would phase out the corporate business tax, which would impact all businesses, small and large, from the mom and pop shop down the street where you go get breakfast to McDonald's and Amazon. A few other states have gone down that road and do not have a corporate income tax. And those states, of course, are the most competitive when it comes to their individual economy in places like Florida, Texas, and Arizona. And before we go to break, I would just like to remind some of the folks out there that it was, of course, the king of tyranny here in the state of North Carolina, our king, Governor Roy Cooper, who vetoed teacher pay raises over the past few years when he would not work with Republicans on a budget compromise. And during that time, I do not recall headlines that made note of this, indicating that Governor Cooper's veto shorted teachers and school workers of pay raises. And in regards to tax reform, well, considering that every single person who actually pays state income tax would pay less, these blanket headlines and statements are just false and are not accurate. And a reminder, a 3.99% individual income tax rate in the state, that's what Republicans are aiming for over the next few years. That would be less than half the rate North Carolinians were paying under Democrat control throughout most of the early 2000s. And during that time, as we approached the Great Recession, teachers and our school districts had education spending frozen because the Democrat-led state government was not prepared for an economic slowdown. So I want to give you a little history lesson and background to take with you to your teacher friends, your educators, and their proponents of, well, we need more money to help pay for the schools. This tired old idea of funding the system rather than, well, looking out for what's best for the students. This idea of funding the students and allowing the money to follow the children rather than the system. State Treasurer Dale Folwell going to join us just after 8 o'clock. We have some questions for Treasurer Folwell on this idea of transparency when it comes to health care and posting the prices of common services that are offered at hospitals and other healthcare facilities, and why? Well, Most hospitals are not complying with federal government direction in publicly making available these prices. And his fight here in North Carolina over that same issue from a few years back. Treasurer Folwell also belongs to what is known as the Council of State. He and other Republicans in this group recently got, the decision rights restored by the governor in regards to the pandemic and voted to lift the moratorium on evictions across the state. This moratorium has been in place for a year. And we'll get Treasurer Folwell's thoughts as to why he voted alongside other Republicans to end this moratorium and restore these rights back to the landlords and property owners. That'll be among some of the discussions we have with Treasurer Folwell in the second hour, along with Professor David Azzerad of the Hillsdale College faculty. He'll be offering a direct contrast to the academic ideas espoused by the 1619 Project. We'll hear from Professor Azzerad of Hillsdale College in the second hour as well. Your calls between now and then at 910-299-7535.
I'm State Farm Agent Rob Renz, and I want to help you get to a better state. We are one of the fastest growing and most reviewed insurance agencies in Wilmington. That's because our customers love the personalized attention that we give to you. Let us help you get to a better state by visiting our website at ilminsurance.com. That's ilminsurance.com. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Hey, remember the saying, if you love something, set it free? Now, if it doesn't come back, it was never yours to begin with. Well, when it comes to your identity, our friends at LifeLock, they're kind of calling BS because all those nights working overtime, saving all that money, paying off all that debt, and now some identity thief wants to try and set it free. They say that's crazy talk, and we agree. Now, that's why LifeLock by Norton helps monitor your information. They will alert you to potential identity threats. If you're a victim, you'll get a dedicated U.S.-based specialist that will help fix it for you. No one can prevent all identity theft, monitor every transaction of every single business. But when identity thieves try to take what is yours, don't take it lying down. LifeLock sees the threats you miss on your own. And today you save up to 25% off your first year. Call 1-800-LifeLock. Go to LifeLock.com. Use the promo code Hannity to save that 25%. That's LifeLock.com, 1-800-LifeLock.
Hey everyone, Ben Hawkins here with Cross Country Mortgage. Rates are still at historic lows, and there has never been a better time to purchase your dream home or refinance your existing. With over 300 loan products including conventional, FHA, VA, USDA, renovation, and jumbo, we are certain we have the right loan product for you and your family. Call me today to be pre-qualified to make the offer on your next dream home. 910-352-3373 or visit my website at lendwithben.com.
Hear Tom Goolsby on the Joe Catenacci Show.
People with common sense know that the entire theory of socialism is one big lie.
The Big Talker 106.7 FM.
Hey, this is Charlie Miller, your state representative in the North Carolina House. Just wanted to say thank you for listening. If you get a chance to go on Facebook and search Representative Charlie Miller to receive my exclusive legislative updates to keep you up to date with all of what's happening in Raleigh. You can also sign up for my newsletter to have a direct line of information straight from the Capitol. Looking forward to hearing from you soon. Paid for by the committee to elect Charlie Miller for NC House.
There is a house in New Orleans they call the rising sun.
All right, as we move up to the top of the hour, a reminder for folks across the river in Brunswick County, I'll be joining the Brunswick County GOP this upcoming weekend from noon until 3 p.m. for a celebration of freedom. Hell, we just spent the weekend celebrating America's birthday on our nation's Independence Day and through the last few days, but why not carry the party into, well, this upcoming weekend? Free to all who attend, have an opportunity to meet elected officials, others who may be seeking elected office in the not-so-distant future. Help us celebrate our freedoms on July 10th, this upcoming weekend from 12 until 3 p.m. at the Brunswick County GOP headquarters on Old Ocean Highway in Bolivia. Great event, hot dogs, drinks, chips, a treat, music at no cost to you. Co-sponsored by Brunswick GOP and the Brunswick County Republican Women. We'll be out there from 12 until 3 Saturday afternoon. For more details, you can go to their website at brunswickgop.org. So up in Washington, D.C., there was a bunch of noise leading into the Independence Day weekend regarding the two Democrats who are kind of standing in the way of all hell breaking loose as far as the Harris-Biden agenda moving on with purely partisan control. Well, of course, the Democrats have the House by 6 or so seats. They've got the split Senate. The vote, the tiebreaker goes to Kamala Harris. Yes, our Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. And the President of the United States, Joe Biden. Go figure. Well, apparently the leader of the Senate, Chuck Schumer, the old tailor from Brooklyn, he was all fired up that Joe Manchin, this was a week or so ago, had agreed to move forward with debate, had agreed that this legislative proposal known as H.R. 1, this voting bill, that Senator Manchin wanted to move forward with debate on the sweeping election reforms bill that essentially would federalize a lot of the election. Now, the federal government and Congress has every right to make changes to the federal election process under the Constitution, but they need the votes, the 60 votes, to do so through the filibuster. So, of course, in the Senate, you've got the filibuster, this 60-vote threshold that you have to hit in order to move non-budgetary related legislation forward in Congress. A reminder that Democrats used the filibuster countless times during the Trump administration to prevent legislation from moving forward, but that's neither here nor there, I guess, under the eyes of the party in charge and their friends in the media. And Democrats had thought with the 50-50 Senate, the House, the White House, that the environment was ripe to maybe work to eliminate the filibuster. And those calls continue today, despite the fact that two Democrats, in Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema out of Arizona, continue to tell us that they're not in favor of removing the long-time rule. In fact, Senator Sinema, who's becoming one of my most favorite Democrats out there in Arizona, she actually provided, through an op-ed in the Washington Post, a full-throated defense of the filibuster as what she calls a guardrail of democracy. So basically what we've been seeing is Senator Schumer, among others, on the Democrat side, hyping things up to get the spin cycle rejuvenated in order to again apply pressure to people like Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema to flip-flop on a stance that they've had since the beginning on the filibuster, on the election reform law. And they're doing this because their agenda has stalled and is not moving forward. Which is why we've been calling a lot of attention, of course, to things that are going on, well, within the realm of education, for instance. This idea of implementing new social studies standards into the public schools here in North Carolina. this idea of critical race theory that is being embraced by the nation's largest teacher union. In fact, we'll hear from Corey DeAngelis later on in the show, and he'll be talking about, this endorsement and the money that is going behind efforts to publicize CRT and put a good spin on the brand and idea. Also, a debate being had within the largest teachers union in the country surrounding mandatory vaccinations and testing for kids leading up into the school year. We'll get to those stories a little later on with Corey DeAngelis of the Reason Foundation and the Cato Institute, outspoken advocate for school choice. State Treasurer Dale Folwell joins us next.
Keeping Southport informed. The Big Talker 106.7 FM WFBT, Carolina Beach.
An emergency declaration covering more than half of his state's counties. He says the pushback has begun. Republican Senator Tom Cotton says parents from coast to coast rising up against a progressive agenda in the public schools.
Senator Cotton says one of the toughest battles is being fought in Virginia's Loudoun County.
I mean, they've got school board members and administrators who are surveilling parents on social media who object to their children being indoctrinated.
Here are just parents everywhere to take a close look at what's being taught in their child's school.
If you don't like it, run for school board.
Cotton tells the Salem Radio Network there may be no better payoff in American politics than running for school board. Bob Agnew reporting.
On Wall Street, stock futures in positive territory. Dow futures up 23 points. NASDAQ futures 82 points higher. More on these stories at townhall.com.
If you're attacked by a bear, a dog will throw himself into the mouth of a bear to save you. Dogs are dogs. They pour out their love onto you. Before long, you can't live without them. I have a chocolate cocker spaniel named Lady and a blackmouth cur. He's about 120 pounds, and his name is Arlo. My little cocker, her coat's as soft as a stuffed animal. They're both real soft coats, and my dogs don't have any health problems because they're eating what they need to eat.
DINOVITE.com.
Dynavite is like pouring a multivitamin right onto their food.
The omega-3 fatty acids, flaxseed, zinc, alfalfa, the digestive enzymes that are cooked out of regular dog food.
We'll be scooping our Dynavite onto the food, then squirting the liquor chops and the fish oil. They start salivating.
Dynavite is nutrition.
You won't believe how happy your dog will be.
It's a lot of responsibility owning a dog. I get my Dynavite at DINOVITE.com.
11 people have been found guilty of sending abusive messages to a French teen who had posted videos online criticizing Islam.
The Mila affair has become emblematic of the tensions over free speech and religion in France. She's a teenage lesbian video blogger who, responding to online abuse about her sexuality last year, posted a diatribe attacking Islam. That set off an avalanche of tens of thousands of hate messages, including death threats, forcing her to leave her school, change address, and now to live anonymously under police protection. Those convicted in this trial, young people in their 20s, all said that they did not appreciate how their individual insults and threats were part of a mass online attack on Mila.
The BBC's Hugh Schofield. Israel's parliament set to inaugurate Isaac Herzog as the nation's president, a largely ceremonial position. News and analysis at townhall.com. The Phoenix Suns take Game 1, the NBA Finals.
Chris Paul led the way with 32 points, 4 rebounds, and 9 assists as the Suns beat the Bucks 118-105 to take Game 1 of the NBA Finals. Devin Booker added 27 points and 6 assists. DeAndre Ayton had a double-double with 22 points and 19 rebounds. Giannis Antetokounmpo had 20 points and 15 rebounds for the Bucks in his first game back from a knee injury. Chris Middleton led Milwaukee with 29. George Tanner, Phoenix.
Haiti's president has been assassinated. That word this morning from the country's interim prime minister. Says the attack happened at the presidential residence. Haiti's first lady, shot and wounded in the attack, said to be hospitalized. Once again on Wall Street this hour, the Dow futures are up 30 points, S&P futures 10 points higher. More on these stories at townhall.com.
The champ is here! The champ is here! The champ is here! The champ is here!
Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's amore. When the world seems to shine like you've had too much wine, that's amore.
Another great start to your morning here across the Cape Fear region. And why is that? Well, because you're tuned in to the most listened to, entertaining, and informative news talk program here in the region on the 106.7 FM signal at BigTalkerFM.com. Video portion of the show available as always by subscribing to our YouTube channel. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Insta. 910-299-7535 is our number if you'd like to call into the show here until 10 o'clock. David Azzerad, professor of Hillsdale College, going to join us in about 35 minutes to provide, pushback against this theory and idea that was highly publicized in the last couple of weeks up the road at UNC Chapel Hill in regards to the job offer that eventually was denied by the Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist who created what is known as the 1619 Project in the publicity stunt that was pulled by Nicole Hannah-Jones, making UNC Chapel Hill look a fool. We'll talk with David Azzerad, who will provide a very direct contrast to the academic ideas espoused by the 1619 Project when he joins us here in 35 minutes. Right now, Treasurer Dale Folwell, our state treasurer, the keeper of the public purse, is with us here this morning. Treasurer Folwell, I hope you enjoyed your Independence Day weekend, and good morning to you, sir.
Good morning to you, and it's a beautiful day in Raleigh, as I'm sure it is on the coast.
It certainly is. And Treasurer Folwell, we love celebrating freedom no matter what day it is. It could be our nation's Independence Day. It could be a random Saturday, like this upcoming weekend. We'll be celebrating freedom at the Brunswick County Republican Party headquarters. Through your eyes, why is this the greatest country and the greatest state to ever exist, one in which you represent as a state treasurer of North Carolina?
As far as the country is concerned, I just don't think there's any place on earth that where people have the upward mobility and the joy of achievement as they have in the United States. And I can also say that about North Carolina. We are a state right now when it comes to upward mobility and economic achievement. We're a state that's providing a tremendous certainty to employers and employees. And the reason why there's a migration in North Carolina is that after all the ribbon cutting and all the Caesar salads and all the fancy dinners, there's somebody somewhere in these companies that are actually sharpening their pencils and figuring out if we relocate or expand in this particular state, what will our situation look like from a tax standpoint, not just this year, but 5, 10, 15, 25 years down the road. And that's what North Carolina is bringing to the business community right now: economic certainty about what tax rates will be, and also decades of evidence that this state has balanced its budget, lived within its means, built rainy day funds and surplus funds, and fully funded its pension plan. And ultimately, at the state or the local level, these are things that businesses desire, and that's why independence and the ability to do this is so important. And as I've said on your show before, conservative means to conserve, to get more out of less, and liberal means to liberate, which is to set free. And I really think that we're setting this economy free in North Carolina, even though there are a lot of folks between where I am and where you are that are still struggling.
Well, there's no question about it, and in due part, in some cases, they're still getting the support that they may need if they're continuing to struggle, say, find gainful employment or deal with a loss of job due to some of the benefits that remain in place here in North Carolina, not elsewhere, by the decision of their respective governors. Unlike Governor Cooper's veto on Friday. But you mentioned tax cuts and the efforts to conserve in our state. And what I've noticed, and we don't pretend to know everything, particularly in places that we don't live or pay attention to, on a day-to-day basis. But what I have noticed is that across a good number of states, say a dozen of them, as lawmakers throughout the country put together various spending plans for their respective states, I've noticed a trend here. There are at least 12 states that have either enacted or are moving forward to enact tax cuts for individuals. In North Carolina, this proposal is on the table through the budget legislation. But what does that tell you when 12 states across the union are looking to lower the tax burden on citizens across the country within their respective boundaries?
It tells you that something. It tells you something that your listeners in the greater Wilmington area have known for a long time, and that is that money does not know where the border is. Money goes where it's invited and stays where it's welcomed. And when we have a certainty and tax policies that have these types of tax rates, money will flow here. And the reason these other states are doing it is they're, in many respects, trying to compete with the robust economy that North Carolina has. And, as I say this, I'm obviously a little bit torn because as well as some parts of our community are doing, there are still many parts of North Carolina that have never really recovered fully from the great financial crisis. And so these other states doing it, I think, are just mimicking what North Carolina's doing. But at the end of the day, money will go where it's invited and stay where it's welcome. And that's why North Carolina has to remain the low-cost place to live and do business, simply because of the tremendous amount of border that we have with other states. I know it's not something your listeners wake up and visualize in the morning, but for 62 miles, we have as much border with other states as California.
Treasurer Dale, go ahead.
Yeah, but for 62 miles. So, when people can just drive 8 miles and get something cheaper, they're going to do so. That's why we have to be evangelical about keeping our tax rates low and the cost of doing business certain.
And there's no doubt that, Republicans in the General Assembly have laid out that vision despite, pushback from members of the media and, colleagues in the opposition party, here in North Carolina, and including the governor with this latest budget negotiation that is just about to get underway here in our state. Despite the country's greatness, Treasurer Folwell, there are definitely things that we need to call out, criticize, and work towards solutions for. And one of the fights that you've embraced over the last several years has been efforts to bring transparency to the healthcare system. I caught an article that is right up your alley, and maybe you can give us just a little brief on your ways in which you were denied access to information despite, a very good case as to why we should be doing things to help consumers, particularly as it relates to health care. So we know that Obamacare that was put in place years ago put forward a regulation that requires hospitals to post prices of their services. The Trump administration then issued regulations under that law to require hospitals to post the prices of the 300 common services in an easy-to-access, downloadable file for consumers to gain access to. Well, what we're finding out is that most hospitals across the country are just not complying with this federal regulation and are doing so in ways that make it very difficult to find their prices in this, on this website or through this downloadable, a PDF file. You had a similar fight not too long ago. Can you give us, a little backdrop as to the ways in which you were met with a stop sign when it comes to gaining access to, prices of services in our hospitals and through our healthcare centers?
I'll start at the end. and by saying that anyone who continues to be in favor of secret contracts and hospital pricing is ultimately going to be on the wrong side of history. And this is an issue that affects all North Carolinians, but especially those that are lower and fixed income individuals. That's why I'm coming out today, for example, to applaud the Biden administration's rule that they're getting ready to issue about surprise billing in healthcare. If your listeners will go to the Wall Street Journal today, they'll see a major expose about how uninsured people are charged the highest prices. I mean, it's crazy that people can walk into the same medical facility and be charged different prices based on whether they have an insurance card or based on what type of insurance card they have. So as you said earlier, this is something that's not Democrat and Republican. This is the biggest virus on our state, and as Warren Buffett said 3 years ago, rising healthcare costs are the tapeworm on the U.S. economy. It's the only thing in your listeners' life that they don't know the value and the price of it, even after they've consumed it. And this is an issue that Elizabeth Warren talked about in the presidential debates last year, that a great majority of the bankruptcies in the United States are based on things dealing with medical billing. As I said earlier, this is anybody who continues to be in favor of secret contracts is on the wrong side of history. And I'll close optimistically on this particular topic by telling you, as strong as North Carolina's economy is in some areas, just close your eyes and imagine the economic gold rush that would come to North Carolina if we were known as the state in the country with transparent health care. You would need 2 Secretary of States just to be open enough hours to register all the businesses that would want to come here. And when businesses come here, they employ people. When they employ people, they typically give them insurance. When they give them insurance, that means that when people get sick, they can pay their bills. And when people can pay their bills, then hospital providers can lower the cost for everyone. That should be the plan. But unfortunately, the governor has absolutely no interest in this topic. The Attorney General, who is supposed to be protecting the consumers in North Carolina, has shown no interest in doing that because of the further consolidation and cartelization of health care in North Carolina over the last 4 years.
Under these federal regulations that hospitals are not adhering to, these prices that are supposed to be displayed include the gross charge for service, the price a cash-paying patient would pay, and the rates that are negotiated with insurers. Treasurer Folwell, as someone who represents the state employees and retirees of the state health plan, you went down this road with big hospitals across our state, and when you demanded some of the information that they were going to provide to you, what did you get when it came to the pile of paperwork that you eventually received?
I got 150 pages of completely redacted typing paper. That means that every part of that sheet of paper is blacked out, except for about a half an inch around the border. And the fact is, they don't want you to know what you're paying for health care. And this is an industry that has spent decades building up this cloak of secrecy. And on top of that, they call themselves nonprofits. And the fact is that they're nonprofit when it's to their advantage, and they're for-profit when it's to their advantage. And at the end of the day, we need to be able to get rid of secret contracts in healthcare. And by the way, this is not about the people who actually provide the healthcare. This is about the multi-billion-dollar companies that call themselves nonprofits. They're actually money management and real estate companies that happen to be in the business of healthcare. And these entities, for example, have made billions and billions of dollars as nonprofits off the backs of sick people. They don't sell software. They don't make widgets. They have made these billions and billions of dollars as nonprofits on the backs of sick people.
State Treasurer Dale Folwell with us twice a month on Wednesdays just after 8 o'clock. Treasurer, as I let you go, Another topic that your name was brought into over the past week or so was a decision by the Council of State to lift the moratorium on evictions here in North Carolina, which drew some criticism from the governor. You got some negative press in the media. I guess it's a two-part question. Why now did the governor seek the Council of State's advice on this moratorium, and why, in fact, did you vote to lift this moratorium on evictions across North Carolina?
Because this whole issue has never been, for him, in my opinion, about good policy. It's been about politics. I mean, why do you come to the Council of State and ask their permission for something? If your heart was really in it, you wouldn't ask for a 30-day extension. You'd ask for a 3-month extension. And the fact is that it was a way of steering the conversation away from the inefficiency of the HOPE program, which was designed when COVID started to connect renters with landlords so that people could keep their shelter, but landlords could get some payments so that the landlords could make their mortgage payments on the properties that they rent to renters. And I was just reading something this morning. What this does, and the reason that I led the effort on this, is that we were unaligned. We were misaligned with the federal government, with the Biden administration and the CDC, with the governor's policy. We do not need to be misaligned. We need to be following one president and one CDC, whether we like the eviction moratorium that they have or not. The fact is, for North Carolina to have one that was out of sync with 20 other states is ridiculous. And I think the income limit as far as the moratorium was $100,000 a year. $100,000 a year in income. And this is just another situation that we need to correct. And we were successful in doing this on the utilities situation, where it didn't matter how much money you had, you didn't have to pay your utility bill. And many of these utilities are offered by cities, and these are topics we need to talk about 2 weeks from now, and also the tight labor market and what's going on with that.
So theoretically, from what you just said, you could make $99,000 a year, but not pay your rent and not be punished or suffer any consequences from that under this moratorium.
That's exactly right. There's all kinds of nuances about this, but this moratorium expired. We're now in alignment with the federal moratorium that the CDC and the Biden administration have put out. We're not misaligned with the other states. But more importantly, this is not about corporate renters. This is about, the ones and twoses, the relationship that has gone on in this state for over a century, for people who maybe have one or two rent houses, and they need to know that if they rent to somebody, that they're going to get paid so that they can pay the mortgage on what it is they owe. And the unfortunate thing, which I was very clear about in my press release, I grew up in this situation with my mother. I know exactly what it means to have the benefit of the doubt by a landlord, where they trust that you're going to get the money to them. And, pushing the power, this one-size-fits-all strategy out of Raleigh, and pushing that power back down to the individuals who have dealt with these types of issues like I grew up in most of my life, is what needed to happen, and that's what will happen.
And again, as you mentioned, it seems more as if it has to do with politics rather than the policy, because he gave the decision rights to the Council of State on this one, which then, of course, was turned into negative headlines for the Republicans in the Council of State. So you kind of took the brunt of the blame and criticism for moving forward with this, rather than the governor doing so, as he has decided pretty much throughout the entire pandemic that it was either his way or the highway, without any sort of consultation with you and the other members of the Council of State until this issue specifically. It's just weird, I guess, ironic, the timing of all this.
This was, and you can see with 1 minute after the deadline that he came out with a press release, you can very quickly see that this was about him not taking responsibility for what I feel like in his own heart he knew was the right thing to do, which was to let this expire. But, as I said to somebody this morning, it takes courage not to be discouraged about a lot of these things. And I'm glad that that we did the right thing, because as Governor Martin continues to say, former Governor Martin, doing right's rarely wrong, and we did the right thing.
Treasurer Dale Folwell, speaker or a keeper of the public purse and our state treasurer here in North Carolina, whom joins us twice a month on Wednesdays inside this 8 o'clock hour. Treasurer Folwell, thanks for the extended time this morning.
Thank you, and be sure your new listeners go to nccash.com to see if they have any unclaimed property at the Treasurer's office. Over $900 million of assets are sitting there, and there's no charge to look up your name, your business name, your kids' parents, or your church's nonprofit's name, and there's no charge to look it up and no charge to get what's owed you.
That's State Treasurer Dale Folwell. Again, nccash.com. While back, I got a nice little $75 check that I forgot to get processed years ago. That was in the unclaimed property pool of money that I benefited from. And then, again, I went on a search, as Treasurer mentioned, of all my family members, friends, and was like, here's the link. Go get your money. It's yours. nccash.com. Great to have Treasurer Folwell, a part of the program twice a month here on the Big Talker FM.
Hi, this is Justin Humphreys from the Humphreys Law Firm on Eastwood Road. The Humphreys Law Firm is located in Lumina Station, Wilmington, North Carolina. Practices civil litigation, intellectual property, commercial, and residential real estate. Please give us a call at 910-332-0721 or visit us on our website, which is www.humphreysfirm.law. You can also listen to me every Thursday from 6 to 7 p.m. on the Big Talker 106.7 FM.
Hi, I'm Dr. Gabe Frank of the Frank Institute, and I want to tell you about our IV vitamin, infusion, and hydration therapies. These IVs are the most effective treatment for vitamin and nutrition deficiencies available, and with our wide range of offering, your treatment can be tailored to your specific needs. Whether you struggle with hydration or nutritional deficiency, injury recovery, low energy, please feel free to check out our IV infusions today. Schedule an appointment at 910-679-8534 or check out all our treatment services at www.frankinstitute.com.
Dana Lash.
Biden, it's like Star Wars when Ewan McGregor is screaming at what's-his-face, the guy who almost sounds like Harry Connick Jr. when he speaks, but he's not. He played Anakin Skywalker in the prequels, and it was after he cut off his arms, and Ewan McGregor is screaming at him, "You were the chosen one!" That is what the establishment is screaming at Joe Biden right now as he flirts with this idea of going down the socialist slope.
The Dana Show.
I am State Farm Agent Rob Renz, and I want to help you get to a better place. Visit us online at ilminsurance.com. That's ilminsurance.com. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Some may ask, why is it important to honor Confederate veterans? The answer, for the many reasons that we honor all veterans. To remember and appreciate those who are willing to give their all for us. To teach our children the meaning of honor and sacrifice, and to remind ourselves that freedom is protected by diligence, and its price is measured in lives. In far greater proportions than any war before or since, North Carolinians answered the call of duty. Meanwhile, back home, entire families made sacrifices that were beyond anything we could possibly now imagine. And because the war was fought almost entirely in the South, those who did return home found their land destroyed and their brothers dead. Often fighting without adequate training and usually without decent clothing and food, they gave their all, including over 40,000 who made the ultimate sacrifice. How then can we not honor them? This message is brought to you by the North Carolina Division of the Sons of Confederate Veterans.
Hey, this is Matt Ham, co-founder of Uprint Faith and Personal Development. Join myself and Kevin Adams every Saturday and Sunday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. on Wilmington's Big Talker for a fun, uplifting conversation about the upside of upside-down living.
All right, as we hit the bottom of the hour, news coverage across the country highlighting, well, right now, a robust discussion surrounding our public education system and the National Educators Association getting behind this idea of critical race theory, getting ready to invest millions of dollars into a publicity campaign, putting a positive spin on the implementation of CRT within our public schools. National Educators Association also debating on whether they're going to get behind mandatory vaccinations and testing for students before returning to face-to-face instruction for the upcoming academic year. Now, you would think there's a fat chance of that happening, but given what we've seen for the past 16 months, I mean, who the hell knows? Oh, what do you know? U.S. economic data does not look quite as robust under the surface as it does in some of the headlines. So you're saying $6 trillion in spending over the past year hasn't worked out the way we thought it was in regards to the response of government overreach and shutting down the country? Huh, who would have thought? And now what? The Biden administration wants to go door to door to make sure you're vaccinated. Coming soon, a government wage, an 800 square foot living quarter for your family, and who knows, community showers and bathrooms for the neighborhood. Huh. No wonder why the media was so hell-bent on highlighting and celebrating and singing the praise of the Chinese Communist Party over the past week while throwing the greatest nation the world has ever known in the mud on a weekend where we celebrate and celebrated our country's independence. Huh. Funny how once you start to connect the dots, you begin to see the bigger picture, and it's not very hard. When we get back, Professor David Azzerad to the Hillsdale College faculty will offer direct contrast to this academic idea of the 1619 Project. Of course, we got word yesterday on national television that after she demanded and received tenure from Chapel Hill, well, she then spurned the offer and turned it down. The investigative Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and creator of the 1619 Project, Nicole Hannah-Jones, created a national controversy to some extent in her battle to receive, well, a six-figure salary on an annual basis along with tenure to the university in which she graduated from. A few folks had some questions about her work. Again, you question anyone in academia as far as their work goes, their ideas, their theories. And, well, if you happen to be a person who has a more lighter pigment of skin color and happens to have male parts, well, then you're a racist and a sexist, and your intentions are all rooted in racism and sexism and not legitimate questions surrounding, well, your ideas, which is what, well, higher education is meant to do. Question theories, ideas, debate the many different viewpoints that millions of people have across the country. Well, Professor David Azzerad at the Hillsdale College faculty will offer direct contrast to the 1619 Project when we get back.
Hello, I'm Jeff Rivenbark with WWAY News. Elsa weakened to a tropical storm as it threatened Florida's northern Gulf Coast this morning after raking past the Tampa Bay region. A hurricane warning was in effect for a long stretch of coastline from Edgemont Key at the mouth of Tampa Bay to the Salinahatchee River in the Big Bend area. There were no immediate reports of damage or injuries in the Tampa Bay area, which is highly vulnerable to storm surge. The most powerful winds were forecast to remain offshore. In Brunswick County, a man has died while swimming at Bald Head Island. Public safety officers were dispatched to beach access number 15 near Snowy Egret Trail around 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon. They found a 55-year-old man who'd been pulled from the water. Attempts to resuscitate were unsuccessful. The man's name has not been released at this time. Lots of people have been at the beaches this weekend. Wrightsville Beach Ocean Rescue reported about 36 rip current rescues yesterday. While lifeguards are there to assist when needed, not every beach town in the Cape Fear has them. And as Elsa approaches the Cape Fear, swimmers are urged to take heed. If the flag posted is green, you can get in the water. If it's yellow, stay knee deep. If you see red flags, stay out of the water. Happening this morning at 10 o'clock, Governor Roy Cooper will again draw names for the winners of the COVID-19 vaccine lottery. $1 million is up for grabs for adults who have been vaccinated. Students who got their shots can win a $125,000 college scholarship. The last drawing winners were Shelley Raymond of Winston-Salem and 14-year-old Vanya Martinez of Wilmington. After today's drawing, there are 2 more chances to win. For more on these stories, head over to WWAYTV3.com. I'm Jeff Rivenbark. Have a great day.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm WWAY meteorologist Ramel Carpenter with your Storm Track 3 forecast. Well, one more fairly quiet day across the Cape Fear, although it's going to be hot and humid once again with temperatures getting back into the upper 80s, low 90s. Coastal areas will top off in the middle 80s this afternoon, and we do have a chance for scattered showers and storms to set up as we get towards midday into the early afternoon hours. But tonight, temperatures will be dropping down into the middle and upper 70s with the breeze starting to pick up ahead of Tropical Storm Elsa. Get your full forecast on WWAY and WWAYTV3.com.
This news and weather is brought to you by 2 Men and a Truck. For your free quote, go to 2menandatruck.com. 2menandatruck.com.
So, yeah, we're in the middle of the Atlantic hurricane season. We know something about it. Located here geographically in Hurricane Alley along the Carolina coastline. You can smell the disappointment from the news networks that, Elsa was pretty much a nothing burger up the Gulf Coast of Florida. And, again, tropical storm. Yeah, rain 4 to 6 inches, 6 to 8 inches. Inland, we'll be dealing with some rain here in the Carolinas over the next couple of days. But you can see it just in the tone and the ways in which the news anchors and the meteorologists are describing what we're seeing from the tropical storm. It's like they almost want Americans to be put in harm's way so they can push a narrative, I guess, something like that. Another reason to stay home, I guess. Just as citizens in multiple states are now suing Republican governors over their decision to end the extra federal unemployment assistance of the $300 a week that our governor, vetoed legislation last Friday. The king of tyranny here in North Carolina, King Roy Cooper. Obviously, yesterday, UNC Chapel Hill was in the news after a very prominent and successful woman, a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist, played him like a fiddle, negotiates, and hey, this is a time for any employee who may be looking to get a new job or re-enter into the workforce, find a different pathway in your career. The negotiations with employers may never be as open as they are today, given the labor shortage. So you can't blame her. She says, hey, the lucrative 5-year contract, it wasn't good enough. I need tenure. All right, you're going to give me tenure, but you know what? the way in which this whole thing played out has left a bad taste in my mouth. So keep your hundreds of thousands of dollars, your tenure, and I'm going to go somewhere else. And, you'll have a black eye on your face because, how dare any donor or, someone within the university question my theories and ideas. I'm a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist. Well, to question some of the ideas and to offer a direct contrast on her main work, meaning Nicole Hannah-Jones, this investigative journalist from the New York Times and the 1619 Project, Professor David Azzerad of Hillsdale College has been patiently waiting on the phone line to offer us a direct contrast of this academic idea. Professor Azzerad, it's a pleasure, and thank you so much for holding the line this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So give us the lowdown. We have the Cliff Notes of 1619 Project. We've read the introduction. We hear that, in fact, the country wasn't, in fact, founded in 1776. It was, 100-plus years earlier, and that we should all, feel guilty that the Founding Fathers, heaven forbid, declared independence from the British Crown. Give us the Cliff Notes and the rebuttal to this academic idea.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, there's nothing original about this. It's the way, regrettably, that history is taught in our schools. You found it already in Howard Zinn, one of the best-selling American historians of all time. Regrettably, it's just this obsession with slavery and race, discarding all the greatness of the past, reducing the founders to slaveholders. Where she went a little bit farther than others is the ludicrous claim that the founders fought the revolution against the crown to protect slavery. The fact checker at the New York Times vehemently protested and said, we can't. Of course they did. Eventually, historians read the piece. Many of them are Democrats, some are liberals, and wrote pieces saying this is an incorrect way to present our history. And the New York Times refused to back down. Nicole Hannah-Jones put out a half-baked tweet. But the point stands that this is just the dominant narrative. This is the way we think about our past. This is the way we teach the next generation of citizens to honestly despise their past, the founding, and this country. The good news, in a certain sense, for the citizens of the state of North Carolina is that she won't be teaching at UNC. Regrettably, she remains a respectable figure in America. She got a MacArthur Genius. She won a Pulitzer Prize for that story. It just shows you how corrupt the elites are.
And with that said, when we look at the ways in which our nation was, in fact, founded, and I think we should all understand it, wrap our hands around it, embrace it in many instances. Even on the 4th of July, for example, there were multiple national news networks, calling our founding documents just, pieces of history filled with hypocrisies in that, the founding really, wasn't as good as, many of us are highlighting and celebrating over the 4th of July. To put your place and self in a time and era that no one can even fathom what life was like, or the fact that many of these young men and rebels were in their 20s and early 30s, and now the average age of a politician in Washington is 60, 70, in some cases 80 years old. Many of them. Never did they ever think that we'd go this far down the pipeline as far as how big and overreaching our federal government is. When we look at the founding documents and the Declaration, they were setting the pathway. They weren't there, again, to radically change it. They were setting the building blocks up for us to take the torch eventually. And we've got notes in history that have highlighted the fact that hundreds of thousands of people have given their lives over this fight for this idea of all men created equal, along with, just not too long ago, a massive movement that changed the shape of our young country.
Absolutely. No one who is honest will deny that when the founders said all men, they meant all human beings. This pernicious lie that they somehow meant all white men, or that they didn't think that black people were human beings, or that they thought that they were 3/5 of a person, is utter nonsense, has been completely debunked, and yet it continues to be peddled. I think the issue for patriotic Americans, what they need to realize is we can't allow the shortcomings of the founding to loom larger in the national consciousness than the greatness of the founding. So was there slavery in America at the time of the founding? Yes. Was it roundly condemned by every single major founder? Yes. Did they fail to abolish it? Yes, because there was too much Southern resistance and they were fighting a war of independence and trying to get a fledgling country off the ground. That being said, we need to admire, we need to whitewash the past or deny what happened is, think of it like a camera lens. What do you want in the forefront of your mind? And it used to be that we would admire their great deeds, winning a war against the most powerful nation in the world, building this nation, establishing a constitution, conquering a vast continent. Whereas today, the first thing we are told and the first thing that comes to mind is slavery all the time. So the point is not to deny it, but to not have it overshadow the greatness of the founding.
And I'm not sure that there's one person out there that may be opposed to the teaching of this theory, an idea that wants to eliminate the teaching or education of our young people of our history, including slavery, along with a war where, again, hundreds of thousands of people gave their lives, over, this idea of slavery and getting rid of it in our country. I don't think anyone that I've heard that is questioning some of these theories and ideas, going down that pathway. Yet that's the way it's portrayed by those in the media and, those who are put on the defense based on some of the ideas that they have.
Yeah, this is what's amazing is that we're having these debates in 2021. It would be one thing if it were 100 years ago. But in 2021, America is obsessed with making excuses for our fellow black citizens, magnifying their accomplishments, and demonizing white people in the past. Nicole Hannah-Jones had the temerity to claim that she was initially denied tenure at UNC because of racism. I put it to you this way, Joe. I don't think there have been more pro-black institutions in the history of mankind than American universities today. And yet the people there still think that they're infected with racism. I tell you this to impress upon you that these people have lost touch with reality. They're utterly unmoored from the real world. They talk as if this is the 1840s or the 1950s. It's nonsense. There's a affirmative action across the board, constant praise for our fellow black citizens, and they continue, these charlatans, the radicals, the intellectuals, the professors, to claim systemic racism across the board.
Professor David Azzerad of the Hillsdale College faculty offering his direct contrast to the idea of the 1619 Project and some of the theories that are espoused in this group of essays published by the New York Times and in which this investigative journalist, the Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist Nicole Hannah-Jones, has pretty much rested her career on. She was in the news yesterday. Made national, went on a national news network to tell everyone that she was denying a lucrative six-figure-a-year salary along with tenure at her alma mater, due in part, as Professor Azzerad mentioned, because of racism up in Chapel Hill. Professor, we see family members, everyday Americans, parents of school-age children pushing back against this. But one group of people that I see, kind of weighing on the sidelines has been the Republican Party. It seems as if the GOP is a little too soft for the moment that we are facing, and that we need more men and women, whether it be in Congress or leading this, Republican Party and conservative movement to, speak up and speak out against this narrative. Are conservatives and is the conservative establishment doing enough to fight back against these ideas?
I mean, surely you're not suggesting that too many Republicans are weak and out to lunch when it comes to the decisive issues of the day. I mean, come on. I live in D.C. I don't know what you're talking about. Listen, of course they are, because they're mortified to touch anything that has to do with race, because you will get called a racist, because that's how the left and the elites proceed, and it paralyzes them. And so they try to, not really engage. They'd rather stick to fighting socialism and tax cuts, because that they understand. This takes you back to Reagan in the 80s. You get to relive the glories of fighting the Soviet Union. You get to talk about economic issues. This is their preferred terrain to fight on. The thing is, there is a fight there to be had. But the main fight today in America is on race, is on cultural issues. And elected representatives, leaders on the right, need to develop the spine to engage on these issues and also develop arguments. I mean, you can't just go out there and bumble. If you make a mistake, you'll get crucified. But they need to do their homework, and they need to go out there because there is a lot of appetite amongst the American people, black and white alike, to hear some common sense on this matter and to stand up to the charlatans and the race hucksters. And not enough people do that.
And that is something that I just read at Politico, for example, and of all places, Professor, in that they claim that progressives are a little confused at this point because they've made a lot of noise here in calling for radical change to the way our country moves forward on this, that, or the other, education, the ways in which capitalism and free markets work to improve your lives as an individual, the people you love, as compared to this message of equity that we hear. And the headline here, progressives and their urgent question, how do we win over voters of color? They thought that they had this in the bag, no, with the ways in which they're pushing this narrative, yet it doesn't seem to be that way.
I'm sorry, you broke off 1 second. I couldn't hear the...
There was an article.
What did you say they're now saying?
There was an article at Politico that I read. Given this agenda that they've been pushing, this idea of "quote unquote" equity, that they are still having a hard time and trying to figure out why they're not necessarily winning over in droves voters of color, particularly Hispanics and even Black Americans out there. Why are progressives perturbed that this message of equity isn't necessarily resonating with these certain blocks of voters?
Yeah, because they're overplaying their hands. I mean, Americans are fundamentally decent people today, and Americans still have a lot of common sense. So there are instances of racism, no one denies it, and there will be sympathy for the victims in that case, and a lot of goodwill from the American people. But the hysterical claims of the left right now, that America is some sort of a version of the Fourth Reich, that it's an open conspiracy to dehumanize blacks, that January 6th was worse than 9/11. I mean, these claims they make are so out of touch with reality that they're overplaying with their hands. Obviously, it's not connecting with many people. What's missing, to go back to what we just talked about, is someone to step up on the right and slap them down, put them back in their place, humiliate them, mock them. This was... for all his flaws, this was one of Trump's greatest strengths, is he was undaunted. He was not impressed by them. And he would say out loud what so many people thought in private and would whisper to themselves. This is a lane that is wide open for an ambitious, intelligent Republican to run in, at the state level or at the national level.
And we see that here in North Carolina, the rise of our Lieutenant Governor, Mark Robinson, among others across the country that see this opening and opportunity and are trying to become that next person that people can look to as far as fighting back in this culture war that has been dominated by the left for so long, whether it be media, athletics, entertainment, academia. They run it all, and in large part because Republicans and conservatives have laid down for the better part of the last 25 years. Professor David Azzerad of the Hillsdale College faculty. Professor, thanks so much for your insight this morning. Let's do it again sometime.
With great pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, we're moving up towards the top of the hour. Great to have Professor Azzerad of Hillsdale College with us here this morning, as seen on the Tucker Carlson Show, among other conservative-leaning news talk programs, whether it be on the boob tube or throughout terrestrial radio, as you tune in here this morning at 106.7 FM at BigTalkerFM.com. Video portion of the show available by subscribing to our YouTube channel on Facebook and Twitter. Find us at Big Talker 106.7 FM.
You wanna be Americano, Americano, Americano. You were born in Italy. You're living alla moda. But if you drink whiskey and soda, all you do is sing off key.
Hey, this is Matt Ham, co-founder of Uprint Faith and Personal Development. Join myself and Kevin Adams every Saturday and Sunday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. on Wilmington's Big Talker for a fun, uplifting conversation about the upside of upside-down living.
Here's 1 minute of tree knowledge in 30 seconds with K.O. Davis.
It's important that you have somebody, a trained professional, to trim your trees. There are these guys out there that just hack trees, and that's the worst thing in the world that you can do. Don't let somebody hat rack your trees. That's a tree term for hat rack. You know how they just cut a tree and it looks like it's just got like a hat rack? These guys just go up and just cut the trees off, and they don't cut it back to the proper spot. Call us, because we care about your trees.
Visit KO's coasttocoasttree.com.
Don't let some yahoo hat rack your trees.
Hey guys, what if I told you that your wedding day could be the happiest day of your life, even if it rained?
You sound like the weatherman.
Better, Jordan. I'm a jeweler with the most amazing guarantee in the diamond business. If you buy your diamond engagement ring from us at Perry's Emporium and it rains on your wedding day, your ring is absolutely free.
It's the Perry's Emporium Legendary Rainy Day Diamond Guarantee.
No other jeweler in Eastern North Carolina has a larger selection of loose diamonds, diamond engagement rings, and wedding bands than Perry's Emporium, all at the guaranteed lowest price. Perry's Emporium in beautiful Barclay Commons behind Henry's, and on the web at perrysemporium.com.
We'll see you when you get here.
We interrupt to bring you this horrible news. Experts say we'll see larger numbers and different breeds of mosquitoes to wreak havoc on your backyard, making this year one of the worst. Anopheles and Culex rati mosquito. Yeah. Experts also say there is only one defense against this onslaught. Call the Bugman from Bugno Pest Control. That's Mr. Bugno to you, pal. Bugno Pest Control's mosquito-killing formula keeps your yard bug-free. Call Bugno Pest Control, 910-367-2501, or visit bugnopestcontrol.com. Take back your yard.
Hey, baby, let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs and have some fun.
Yeah, here come the rooster. Yeah. You know we ain't gonna die.
Great to have Professor Azzerad of Hillsdale College a part of the program just a moment ago, offering his rebuttal to the 1619 project, filled with inconsistencies, inaccuracies, and many of which have been called to attention, yet, these essays and the work of the Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist still being pushed onto our young people. And as Professor Azzerad mentioned, would we rather, in the forefront of the rearview mirror, look at some of the ugly and terrible parts of our history, or would we rather tell the story as to how we overcame many of the ways in which life operated centuries ago, by the way, hundreds of years ago, millions of lives sacrificed in this fight. Yet here we are in the year 2021, as the professor said, still having this conversation. It'd be different if it was 1890 or 1950. The year is 2021, folks. Yet this is the narrative that is still being pushed by those who want more control, by the collective ways of thinking, rather than the idea of individualism and personal responsibility. And hell, they even want to come door to door right now to make sure that you're all vaccinated up, that you've got your BS COVID-19 Chinese Communist virus vaccination. They're coming door to door, as told to you by the President of the United States himself on Tuesday, to get help to the people who need it, to protect them from the virus. That's the role of government, to protect you from any and everything, from cradle to grave. Coming soon, 3 squares a day, government set wages, 800 square feet affordable living quarters, alongside your neighborhood with community showers and toilets, just like the dorms in the old days. Boy, oh boy. Richard Battle of the freedom-loving state of Texas joins us next.
keeping Charlotte informed. The Big Talker 106.7 FM WFBT, Carolina Beach.
Greater than 3 feet of storm surge. That's what the criteria for the warning. So areas like Tampa Bay, 3 to 5 feet of storm surge. And I do want to remind you, this is the maximum that we could see, and that's at high tide.
National Hurricane Center Director Ken Graham, Hurricane Center Specialist Philippe Papin says Elsa will make landfall later today.
Right now, it's kind of heading towards sort of the Big Bend area of Florida.
After crossing Florida, the storm heads into Georgia, where there is concern it could spin off tornadoes before heading north along the East Coast from the Carolinas, eventually all the way up into New England. Rockets have slammed into a base housing American troops in Iraq. Reports of 3 minor injuries. And Haiti's president has been killed.
Haiti's interim prime minister says in a statement, President Jovenel Moïse has been assassinated after a group of unidentified people attacked his private residence. Claude Joseph said Moïse's wife, First Lady Martine Moïse, is in hospital. Joseph condemned what he called a hateful, inhuman and barbaric act, adding that Haiti's national police and other authorities had the situation in the Caribbean country under control. The killing comes amid deepening political and economic instability and a spike in gang violence. I'm Charles de Ledesma.
Stocks ended mixed yesterday on Wall Street, and as of right now, stock futures are mixed. The Dow futures down 27 points, NASDAQ futures 88 points higher, and S&P futures are up 4 points ahead of this morning's opening bell on Wall Street. More on these stories at townhall.com.
Excuse me, why don't you have life insurance yet?
I've got diabetes, and I know the price will be through the roof for the pre-existing condition.
Well, actually, SelectQuote makes it easy to get very affordable life insurance, even if you have a health issue.
I'm listening.
You'll get quotes from some of the country's most trusted carriers. Even with your diabetes, you can get around $250,000 in insurance for as little as $1 a day.
That would be amazing. What's it called again?
SelectQuote. Just call or go to selectquote.com to get your free quote. Get the coverage you need at a price you can afford. Call 1-800-694-1010 or go to selectquote.com today. That's 1-800-694-1010 or selectquote.com. SelectQuote. We shop. You save. Get full details on example policy at selectquote.com/commercials. Monthly premiums vary based on health, company, and other factors. Not available in all states.
A huge container ship that blocked the Suez Canal in March, disrupting global trade, is finally leaving the waterway after Egypt signed a compensation deal with owners and insurers of the vessel.
The release of the Ever Given is definitely a relief for its crew members, as well as for companies with goods on board. The 200,000-ton cargo vessel drew world attention after it was wedged across the Suez Canal, bringing navigation to a standstill in the vital shipping route. The terms of the financial settlement between the Canal Authority and the ship's owners will not be disclosed.
And that's the BBC's Sally Nabil. A powerful mudslide that killed at least 7 people, destroying dozens of homes in a Japanese seaside resort, started in an area with a history of land alterations, that according to local officials. News and analysis at townhall.com. Former President Jimmy Carter and his wife Rosalind celebrating their diamond wedding anniversary today.
As they mark 75 years of marriage, the Carters extend their record as the longest married presidential couple in American history. And at 96, Carter has lived the longest of all U.S. presidents. Jimmy and Rosalind are devout Christians and read the Bible together aloud each night. They live in Plains, Georgia, the tiny town where they were born and grew up. Carter served as the 39th American president. Greg Clugston, the White House.
President Biden says his administration is stepping up efforts to reach unvaccinated Americans, declaring that the fight against the coronavirus is not over. The president announcing plans to expand door-to-door outreach efforts in communities that have lower vaccination rates. Once again on Wall Street this hour, Dow futures down 38 points. More on these stories at townhall.com.
Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's amore. When the world seems to shine like you've had too much wine, that's amore.
Seven minutes past the top of the hour. You're tuned in to the Big Talker FM. We are atop the Murchison Building, overlooking Battleship, North Carolina, along the Cape Fear River. Coming to you until 10 o'clock here on the Big Talker, 106.7 FM at BigTalkerFM.com. Richard Battle, my buddy from the Lone Star State, joins us each week inside this third and final hour of our program in the middle of the broadcast week on Wednesdays, and is once again with us from the freedom-loving state of Texas. Richard, I hope you enjoyed your 4th of July holiday and really enjoyed your commentary leading up into our nation's Independence Day. Good morning.
Good morning, Joe. Thank you so much for having us, and it was a great Independence Day, and we should celebrate it every day.
Well, and with that said, I was in the ocean and swimming with hundreds of others, extremely crowded, and I went the tourist route, in my own town. I said, you know what? Last year we were locked down. I was in COVID quarantine. I'm going to live like a tourist. We're going to be hunkered down to the crowded beaches, swimming around one another in the ocean. And a stranger said, man, nothing better than this. I said, nope, and we got another day tomorrow. He said, I got to go to work. I said, I've been working too long. I'm taking tomorrow off. That's the benefit of, putting your, what is it now, some 17 years of my adult life into the workforce. I want to take a day. I'm going to take a day. And that is kind of the topic of our discussion here this morning on this, work and life balance and how, we need to, of course, strive to be productive and contributing toward our society, but also not forgetting some of the more important things in life, like our family, like our relationships, like things that we get enjoyment in through hobbies and other sorts of activities. Give us some sense as to where you stand as someone who is, towards the back end of your career, retirement age, and one who has put the sweat equity into the life that you're enjoying now.
Well, the topic is about the busyness of life and whether it's beneficial or detrimental. And yes, I've been around long enough to have seen a major change, I think, in our culture. And the question is it better for us or not? And does it get us into better balance of life or not? Because we have more conveniences than ever. We can be more productive than ever, but there are costs to that because we'll see our calendars full. And sometimes it's when we're coming back out of the pandemic and all of a sudden our schedules are full. The end of the day, we feel exhausted, but we look up and we can't really see we accomplished anything. We're busy all the time, but we don't ever seem to change our circumstances. We fall for short-term successes that don't contribute to our long-term goals. And there's just this feeling of being out of control and being a slave to day after day after day.
Well, and, I can speak, for myself and myself only, as it goes to this work-life balance, and in particular, finding work that doesn't entail having, higher levels of management over me, meaning working for myself, and this idea of maybe entrepreneurship or, taking a risk where, you may be busy certain parts of the day and the week or the weekend, but at other times, maybe when the typical 9-to-5 worker is on the job, you're out there enjoying the sun and the sand at the beach because you have those sorts of luxuries when you make your own choices. What do you mean that, in today's kind of world, given the conveniences, given the ability to work wherever you may want to, from a remote location, for instance, why do people typically feel tired and like they're not accomplishing much by putting in that day's work, getting back at home, spending time with the family, and then doing it all over again the next day?
Well, I think also most of us multitask during the day, and because we're trying to keep ahead of our requirements. And there's a 24/7 component to this, and it doesn't matter if you have your own business or you work for someone else. A lot of jobs have a feeling of being where you have to be there 24/7 mentally, which creates issues as well. And people expect us to respond to communications almost instantly. Years ago, before cell phones and the internet and things of that nature, people might call your office looking for you, and if you were out, if they called in the morning, they expected a return call that afternoon. If they called in the afternoon, they were okay if you didn't call them back until in the morning. But now people expect instant communications, and that creates a pressure no matter if it's coming from a customer, if you're a cell phone business, or whether you work for someone else. There's this expectation and pressure to be available and respond instantaneously.
Well, that's funny to me because my wife and a lot of my family members always ask me why my phone seems to be shut off, and I give them the excuse, and I say, and when they try to call me, it goes right to voicemail. I say, well, it's kind of done purposely. Once the battery runs out, it means something. It means I'm done communicating with others for the day, and I'm spending some of my own time. Maybe it's a selfish way of looking at things, but again, trying to put it in perspective. I'm not someone curing cancer or removing tumors and completing surgery on people that save lives. I have a job. I try to do the job to the best of my ability. I put my work in, and then sometimes when it's time, it's quitting time, and I'm done, and I try and disconnect. A lot of folks have trouble doing that these days.
Well, I agree, and I think that's a great example. And one of the few lessons I learned from my college professors was how they scheduled office hours. And those were the only hours they would be in their office and talk to students. And I think we need to do more of those type things as well, where we schedule opportunities for people in different segments of our lives to be available, and then other times that we have those for other priorities. And of course, it's not perfect in anyone's life, but the better we can schedule those type of things, the better we can gain control and have more balance in our lives.
On that note, it's kind of a catch-22, no, Richard? Because and we talk oftentimes about the need for work ethic, the ability to strive for goals, to set the bar, and then try and reach those standards. And oftentimes it takes a little bit of going further and longer and later than you typically would in order to reach those goals. So how do we find, and how do we work to, kind of recalibrate our lives to make sure, we're still striving to be the best, to find success, to earn that a little extra income, while also making sure you're spending time with your family. You're doing things set aside for yourself personally. How do we, hit the reset button in a day like today?
Well, I think the first thing is to step back and take time and reflect and listen to your inner spirit and listen for inspiration to give you the desires and the mission for your life. But also, I think it's important that we not only just strive in one area, because we can get out of balance, and it's common for us to be out of balance, but if we set goals in multiple areas, our faith part of our life, our family, our personal, professional, physical, social areas, for example, if we set goals in all of those and then manage those goals, we can try to be in more balance in more areas than if we're just pursuing the goal of professional success, for example.
Richard Battle with us, author of several books, including Navigating Life's Journey, Common Sense in Uncommon Times, his piece that we refer to often during his weekly radio hits with us just after 9 o'clock Eastern Time from the Lone Star State. RichardBattle.com is his website if you'd like to learn more about what he does and why he does it. When we talk about short-term goals over the long game, one that we all wish to live, a long, fruitful, and successful life where we can pass something on to the future generations, your kids, your grandkids coming up, is and often entertaining this idea of your own mortality is something very difficult to do. Obviously, looking at the end of the spectrum, meaning your life timeline. But at the end of the day, what are some of the things that we should be asking ourselves as far as that long-term game goes?
Well, I think the first thing is people are distracted with opportunities. And I say people, it includes me as well. And successful people are usually bombarded with activity opportunities. People want successful people to help them. And unless you have long-term goals set up and have figured that out, it's difficult to say no to people. And the easiest way to say no to someone respectfully is to tell them that it does not fit your goals for this particular year. And if you're on a program where you set goals each year and manage them and then revise them at the start of a new year, it makes it easier to look at an opportunity and decide, does that help my long-term goals, or is it something that will only help in the short term and I ought to say no to it so I can focus on things that contribute to my long-term goals?
Well, given the fact that I have a 3.5-year-old in my house, I have no problem telling people no on a consistent basis. In fact, it comes out of my mouth about 1 million times an hour. So I've got no problem with that, Richard. Obviously, you're directing your thoughts to all of our listeners out there that have trouble doing so. Whether is it going to get me rich? No. All right, I'm good. We'll pick it up tomorrow. Give us an example, Richard, of how all of us can do better to kind of, balance ourselves when it comes to work, life. Heck, we have a lot of retirees that live and listen to this program that get up each day and they don't do much as far as, setting themselves something to do on the day. Others are busy, hour to hour and have one of those schedules. But I know plenty of retirees out there that, really have nothing on the docket. Some of it's okay, but that also leads to some of a decline in one's life when you don't have that social activity, when you're not out being active, particularly in your later years of life.
Well, purpose is the most important thing. And I tell people that are looking at retirement, the most important thing is to know what you want to do. And it doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's what you want to do and you enjoy it, it's okay. But I see people being bored in retirement years when they haven't thought about what they want to do and they don't have any purpose at all. And it doesn't matter if it's playing golf 7 days a week or working at a food bank or whatever it is or what combination it is. But if you take time to think and decide what your purpose is and what would make you feel as a contributor, not only to your own life and family, but to other people, I think you'll feel more fulfilled. And I think that leads to a longer and happier life.
Timeless positive messages of proven principles, helping people win every day. That's the mindset that Richard Battle takes with him on a day-to-day basis, and one that we're trying to lay on you here today as far as this larger discussion in regards to life's purpose, whether you're just setting out on your career, you're in the middle of things the way in which I am, or like many of our listeners, you're on the back end of life's timeline, and you're trying to get the best experience possible for all that hard work you put in during your working years. Richard Battle with us here this morning, award-winning author, speaker, and advisor, joins us every Wednesday inside this third and final hour. You can find out more about what he does, why he does it, at richardbattle.com. Richard, thanks so much for the time this morning. I look forward to next week.
Likewise, Joe. God bless America.
We're 20 minutes past the hour here on the Big Talker FM, richardbattle.com. It was great to catch up with him, eat some brisket down in Texas earlier this spring. We'll be back in a couple of years. Well, maybe this fall, potentially. We'll see. Enjoyed my time down there in Texas, and it was great to put a face and a voice to an actual human being, as we typically do here, through the local level, statewide, but to be able to go out all across the country and meet some of our guests and friends of our program. Another great life experience that we get to enjoy doing what we do here each and every morning on the Big Talker FM.
pandemic's taught us anything, it's that the easiest way for germs to get into your body is the nose. We all know how to wash our hands, but how do you clean your nose? For over 2 million Americans, the answer is Navage Nasal Care. Navage uses powered suction to flush out allergens, mucus, and germs that cause congestion, colds, and flu, so you can breathe better, sleep deeper, snore less, and feel healthier. Better yet, Navage is all natural and drug-free. That's why one of America's top respiratory hospitals recommends nasal irrigation to stay healthy, explaining that bacteria and viruses thrive in warm and moist environments, and that you can wash away those germs so they don't make your nose their home. Experience Navage at zero risk. Go to Navage.com, buy Navage, and use it for a month. If you're not delighted, return it for a full refund. There's nothing to lose and a lifetime of better breathing to gain. Also available at Target, Walgreens, CVS, Bed Bath, and Rite Aid. Navage, N-A-V-A-G-E.
Folks, we all know ongoing road construction and traffic can weigh heavy on your vehicle. Since 2006, O'Leary's Automotive Repair has provided comprehensive repair services at affordable prices to get you back on the road in no time. Their ASE certified technicians will help you find a cost-effective repair and maintenance alternatives. O'Leary's has multiple locations in the area in Hampstead, Leland, the Myrtle Grove area, Ogden, and Wrightsboro. O'Leary's Automotive Repair, a trusted, locally owned business since 2006.
Mike check, Mike check. It's the Iowa Losowski here, Deputy Director of the Consumer Choice Center. You'll hear me every Friday at 9:30 on the Mornings with Joe Catenacci Show, giving you the latest in consumer news, analysis, and political topics to make sure you get your consumer fix. Then hear me and my radio partner in crime, David Clement, on the Consumer Choice Radio Show, Saturdays at 10. Only here on the Big Talker 106.7 FM.
Here, Tom Goolsby on the Joe Catenacci Show.
People with common sense know that the entire theory of socialism is one big lie.
The Big Talker 106.7 FM.
Hey everyone, Ben Hawkins here with Cross Country Mortgage. Rates are still at historic lows, and there has never been a better time to purchase your dream home or refinance your existing. With over 300 loan products including conventional, FHA, VA, USDA, renovation, and jumbo, we are certain we have the right loan product for you and your family. Call me today to be pre-qualified to make the offer on your next dream home. 910-352-3373 or visit my website at lendwithben.com.
Acoustic wave therapy at the Frank Institute is a revolutionary treatment for inflammation, issues of blood flow, and is a solution for the constant suffering of chronic pain. Through the localized transmission of sound waves, stem cells are stimulated to bring about restored blood flow, vascular regeneration, and the disbursement of pain receptors to affected areas. If you've been told that your issues could not be treated without surgery or prescription, give us a call. Non-invasive, non-surgical, and prescription-free. Acoustic wave therapy is only available at the Frank Institute. Call today, 910-679-8534, and ask about acoustic wave therapy.
"25 minutes past the hour, and if you're tuned into some of the national news networks today and over the next few hours, you'll quickly see the disappointment in the body language of those delivering the news concerning the tropical storm that is making its way up the Gulf Coast of Florida. I spoke with some family down in the Gulf yesterday from Venice, Florida, up through Tampa, and largely just a rain event. It'll be making its way up this way tomorrow through a couple of states, and during the break I was just looking at the weather radar and the future outlook for this area and it'll be around this time tomorrow that we get the brunt of the rainfall. And really, it looks like through the radar, should it stay on track, places inland going to deal with the heaviest of rains. Looks like along the I-95 corridor. That's not to say we're not going to get blasted with some rainfall, some wind. It will look like sweep by us from around 6:30 tomorrow morning up through around, as I said, this time tomorrow about 10:30, 11, and then looking at the future cast, for all intents and purposes, by early afternoon tomorrow, it should be cleared out as far as the rain and the wind goes here for southeastern North Carolina. Central part of the state, parts, areas due north and west, we'll be dealing with it for, mainly Wednesday, early afternoon into the evening hours. We'll get much of that tomorrow morning. When we get back from the bottom of the hour news break, Corey DeAngelis is an outspoken advocate for school choice, has coined this idea of funding students rather than systems, and he came across a few nuggets over the last few weeks since he previously joined the program to tout 25 years in commemoration of the original charter school legislation that was approved here in North Carolina. He was in the Tar Heel State to celebrate that occasion with several school choice advocates up in Raleigh a few weeks back, and we had him on the show. Since then, there have been revelations that the largest teacher union in the country, the National Educators Association, getting ready to ramp up their branding and publicity and support of critical race theory in our schools. A hotly debated topic in many local school districts these days, including right here in New Hanover County, where there was a 6.5-hour school board meeting not too long ago with proponents of it conflicting with those who believe this theory goes a little too far, particularly within our K through 12 education system. To debate the tenets of critical race theory, I think, as I've said, deserves a spot maybe in our places of higher education, even though many of the folks who would be guiding these conversations, we kind of know as far as their political ideology goes, in that many of our college professors these days veer far to the left of the political spectrum. So very difficult maybe for a conservative-minded student or even one independently minded who wants to study and learn more about different theories, ideas, and viewpoints. Very difficult for them to get solid footing as to what is included in this idea of CRT and why we're trying to implement it in our school-aged kids as young as our elementary and middle schools. Now, you want to look at the different, of course, shortcomings within our legal system, for instance, or our criminal justice system, the courts. Well, I'm all ears and want to have these sort of discussions. Of course, we also want to remind folks out there when we are having these types of conversations, particularly as it relates to the criminal justice system, the amount of folks put into our jails and the disproportionate amount of certain demographics that have been put into jail for certain crimes that they've committed along the way. We want to refer you back, of course, to the Democrat Party, their efforts here in North Carolina, led by folks such as our king of tyranny, Governor Roy Ray Cooper, who in fact pushed legislation as a state lawmaker years ago, pushing minimum sentencing laws, for instance, that created disparities within our criminal justice system. And then while as the attorney general for the better part of 15 years, refused to move forward with a backlog of rape test kits that disproportionately impacted, of course, women and women of color. He had all of these opportunities to right wrongs along the way during his political career, yet now uses the megaphone and the bullhorn to call attention to the need for equity in our system. Yet he, along with many cut from his cloth, were in fact the ones who pushed legislation many moons ago that have led us down this road. And now they want to introduce these sorts of ideas and theories such as CRT into the classroom. This idea that folks immediately from birth should look at the pigment of their skin and then feel one way or the other, as in being inherently oppressed or inherently oppressive based on what you look like. In fact, the National Educators Association, along with some of these other left-leaning groups, are getting ready to put out different talking points and offer up tactics to folks who want to push CRT in public education, to attack parents and groups that oppose critical race theory in our K-12 schools. Corey DeAngelis will give us the insight on some of the issues up for debate within the largest teacher union in the country, known as the National Educators Association. Also a new business item that is awaiting discussion in terms of COVID and mandatory vaccinations and testing for all students and staff before returning to face-to-face instruction this fall. And then, of course, we're hearing about the different variants now. The Delta variant, the Lambda variant. Every time I hear that term, of course, I think of the movie Revenge of the Nerds, the Tri-Lambs, the Lambda variant. We'll get an update from Corey DeAngelis. Also, news that, a man who has become very popular in these CRT circles, author of the book, How to Become an Anti-Racist, whatever that means, a man by the name of Ibram Kendi, who received a $25,000 payout to speak during the summer speaker series within the Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools out in our biggest school district across the state. What ideas has he taken and tried to implement, within our schools based on CRT? Corey DeAngelis, once again from the Cato Institute and the Reason Foundation, going to shine some light on all of these stories when we get back for the final half hour of our program right here on the Big Talker FM.
Hello, I'm Jeff Rivenbark with WWAY News. Elsa weakened to a tropical storm as it threatened Florida's northern Gulf Coast this morning after raking past the Tampa Bay region. A hurricane warning was in effect for a long stretch of coastline from Edgemont Key at the mouth of Tampa Bay to the Salinahatchee River in the Big Bend area. There were no immediate reports of damage or injuries in the Tampa Bay area, which is highly vulnerable to storm surge. The most powerful winds were forecast to remain offshore. In Brunswick County, a man has died while swimming at Bald Head Island. Public safety officers were dispatched to beach access number 15 near Snowy Egret Trail around 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon. They found a 55-year-old man who had been pulled from the water. Attempts to resuscitate were unsuccessful. The man's name has not been released at this time. Lots of people have been at the beaches this weekend. Wrightsville Beach Ocean Rescue reported about 3 dozen rip current rescues yesterday. While lifeguards are there to assist when needed, not every beach town in the Cape Fear has them. And as Elsa approaches the Cape Fear, swimmers are urged to take heed. If the flag posted is green, you can get in the water. If it's yellow, stay knee-deep. If you see red flags, stay out of the water. Happening this morning at 10 o'clock, Governor Roy Cooper will again draw names for the winners of the COVID-19 vaccine lottery. $1 million is up for grabs for adults who have been vaccinated. Students who got their shots can win a $125,000 college scholarship. The last drawing winners were Shelley Raymond of Winston-Salem and 14-year-old Vanya Martinez of Wilmington. After today's drawing, there are 2 more chances to win. For more on these stories, head over to WWAYTV3.com. I'm Jeff Rivenbark. Have a great day.
As Wilmington's leader in restorative and regenerative medicine, the Frank Institute specializes in health optimization. Simply put, we use in-depth evaluations and lab testing to determine the best treatments for each patient. So whether you're suffering from an unseen hormonal imbalance or a simple vitamin deficiency, the Frank Institute is ready to get you back to better living. Call us at 910-679-8534 or fill out our symptom survey online at frankinstitute.com. Because at the Frank Institute, you live, we help.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm WWAY meteorologist Ramel Carpenter with your Storm Track 3 forecast. Well, one more fairly quiet day across the Cape here, although it's going to be hot and humid once again with temperatures getting back into the upper 80s, low 90s. Coastal areas will top off in the middle 80s this afternoon, and we do have a chance for scattered showers and storms to set up as we get towards midday into the early afternoon hours. But tonight, temperatures will be dropping down into the middle and upper 70s with the breeze starting to pick up ahead of Tropical Storm Elsa. Get your full forecast on WWAY and WWAYTV3.com.
This news and weather is brought to you by Two Men and a Truck. For your free quote, go to twomenandatruck.com. twomenandatruck.com.
What the hell's going on out here?
This is the rhythm of the night. The night. Oh yeah. The rhythm of the night. This is the rhythm of my life. My life. Oh yeah. The rhythm of my life.
More and more attention being paid from what I see in regards to education in our country. More attention being paid to public education and the ways in which our public schools operate than any other time, maybe even in my life over the course of the last 3.5 decades. But I guess that is why, in fact, a result of shutting down schools in the country for the better part of the last year. Everyone gets a pretty good look at life as we knew it, where we are presently, and where we are moving into the future. Of course, a lot of talk these days, as it's been forever, when it comes to the Democrat Party in particular, always using identity politics and rather than looking at the content of your character, looking at the color of your skin to guide most of the conversations, to continue to stir up division, ultimately, in my mind, to just create this divide and conquer sort of way of life. You don't want to highlight the similarities between everyone because then they may build upon that and unify against the powers that be. The influence and the money, the massive amounts of money that continue to be invested into things like public schools. And to get what from it? 70% of kids who can't read, write, or do math proficiently in our grade schools, up through middle and high schools. And where do we go from there? And what contributions do these kids make to society when they can't read, write at third grade level? And the hurdles and obstacles these kids will face for years on end into their adulthood and the problems that will come from that. No one wants to have those sorts of conversations because it's all about what you look like and where you come from, right? Well, that's apparently what the National Educators Association believes, the largest teacher union in the nation. They've got a couple of business items on the agenda that have caught the attention of our next guest, Corey DeAngelis of the Reason Foundation, the Cato Institute. He was in North Carolina a couple of weeks ago. He joined us to celebrate the 25th anniversary of North Carolina's original charter school law. And in fact, we just got some numbers as far as school enrollment over the past year and homeschooling, private schools, alternatives to the public education system that remained virtual for much of last academic year. They were kind of left in the dark as more and more parents decided to take advantage of alternatives out there. Corey, it's a pleasure. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Hey, when you look at some of the numbers, and I know you've probably scoured over them here in North Carolina and elsewhere as far as enrollment numbers, we've seen massive increases percentage-wise in homeschools, homeschoolers, private schools, parents taking the choice, given the option this past year. What does that say to you, given the numbers that we've seen trending in this direction for quite some time?
Well, it's what you said earlier. Look, the jig is up for the public school monopoly. Families have figured out that the public school system doesn't really prioritize the needs of their children all that much in so many places. So they're supporting concepts like school choice more than ever. Nationwide, the latest Real Clear Opinion Research polling found a 10 percentage point jump in support for the concept of funding students as opposed to systems, or what most people call school choice, from 64% support in April of 2020 to 74% support in June of 2021. which is an even bigger jumps in support, about a 12 percentage point jump in support among families with kids in the public school system, with about 80% of that population supporting school choice. And if you look at North Carolina, people are voting with their feet too. 3% of the public school population isn't there anymore. So it's decreased by 3% in traditional schools. And in private schools, there's been a jump of enrollment by about 3.3%. And for homeschools, it's an estimated jump of about 21%. So people are voting with their feet. They're showing what they prefer. And I think a lot of it has to do with, one, over the past year, the school system hasn't prioritized kids, and they've tried to protect themselves at the expense of families. I mean, it's one thing for a school to continue to get kids education dollars regardless of the family's choice and regardless of how well they educate those children, as you already pointed out, but it's another conversation altogether for those same institutions to get children's education dollars regardless of whether they even open their doors for business. So the monopoly has been exposed, and families are fighting back. They're also looking into what's happening in the schools. During remote learning, families got to see a little bit of the curriculum and maybe some of the political slant that was happening in the school buildings. And so families are pulling their kids out because of that as well. So you see families going to the school boards and voicing their opinions. Families are fired up, and they're pushing for reform in the traditional system, but they're also pushing for alternatives like charter schools and private schools.
When we have these heated conversations that we're seeing across the country, even right here in the county in which we broadcast from, recently our school board had a 6.5-hour meeting because there were proponents and opponents of this critical race theory, and we'll get into that in a moment. But my thought is we've got numbers that aren't very numbers that should be stand out and told. 70% of kids on average are not NOT proficient in reading, math, and writing. Yet the conversation for 6.5 hours is on CRT, critical race theory, and not necessarily test scores and grades and how we can work to make sure that our kids are getting the fundamentals down on pat before we introduce all these complicated theories and issues that are up for discussion at the third grade level in some instances.
Yeah, in the United States, the majority of kids aren't proficient in math or reading. And look, I think this reflects the priorities of the teachers unions. Maybe they'd rather focus on these other things than get the tough stuff right, the math and reading and the writing. If you look at the National Education Association, the largest teachers union in the U.S., which you mentioned earlier, they failed to pass a measure in 2019 to, quote, make student learning the priority of the association. They defeated that measure. But then just this year, they approved two measures. One and both of these together cost around $180,000. And it's about publicizing information on critical race theory and also conducting opposition research on anybody who opposes critical race theory. So they're approving those kinds of things and spending a ton of money on it. But then they couldn't even pass a measure to just focus their efforts on student learning just 2 years ago. And I called that out yesterday morning about where their priorities lie. And since then, the nation's largest teachers union scrubbed their website. You can't find any of these business items anymore. And they took them all off their website, I guess, in the name of transparency.
This is the nation's largest teacher union that has a few business items that have caught your attention. And let's start with the first one that originally had me here reach out to you, and that was the fact that the NEA, National Education Association, is discussing whether or not they should jump behind the idea of mandatory vaccinations and testing for all students and staff before returning to face-to-face instruction. Sounds a lot like going door-to-door, as the Biden administration made mention of yesterday, to make sure everyone is safe and sound with their COVID vaccine.
Yeah, they did have that one on the docket, and they voted on it a couple of days ago. And thankfully, they failed to adopt that proposal to mandate that all kids and staff get vaccinated before schools reopen. And I think the reason for this is because nationwide, a lot of schools have already reopened. So those members probably voted against that, realizing that, look, nationwide, teachers unions have overplayed their hands. Support for school choice is on the rise. It's at an all-time high, a 10 percentage point jump since last year. And the number of states that have expanded school choice this year have grown dramatically. There's been 16 states that have already expanded funding students directly, or what most people call school choice. 35 states had bills in play this year, and we expect more victories as well going forward. And then look, the latest federal data estimate that about 1.5 million families nationwide, or students nationwide, have left the K-12 public school system. That is a lot of money. That's billions of dollars associated with those kids that the establishment is going to lose in the next couple of years if those kids don't come back. So I think they're starting to scratch their head and realize that, there's a limit to how much we can do when it comes to these ridiculous requirements. But that doesn't mean that no state is going to go forward and try to make this play of requiring vaccines to reopen schools going forward. This proposal was brought up at the meeting by delegates from California. So maybe in states like California, they'll try to kick the can down the road even further and see how much they can wield their power. I mean, it worked in Los Angeles. They have increased their per pupil funding this year, according to the just approved budget, by 59%. 59%, you think that's a lot? It increased by 69% since 2019. Los Angeles public schools went from about $15,000 per kid in 2019 to over $26,000 per child in the 2021-2022 school year. So that on the one hand, unions have overplayed their hand because people are supporting school choice more than ever and they're leaving the system, but they kind of got what they wanted from the taxpayer.
Well, of course, highlighting throughout the pandemic, the Los Angeles teacher union specifically, they had all sorts of demands that they had wanted implemented before they went back to face-to-face instruction. We're talking about Medicaid expansion and all sorts of other, trinkets and trunkets that had nothing to do, of course, with reading, writing, and math. And I'm not sure, maybe Los Angeles County schools are producing, scholars and, top of the class type of kids at universities and rocket scientists. But the last I heard, Los Angeles County schools, a lot like many of our other, urban areas when it comes to, again, the proficiency of the children that attend these schools.
Yeah, no, they're not doing any better in Los Angeles. And look, they're spending over $26,000 per student. Average private school tuition is less than $15,000 per student in Los Angeles. So why not give some of that money to the families? Even if you only gave them half, they'd be able to afford a lot of private schools and get a lot better education than what they would in the traditional system. This is why I call it a fund students as opposed to systems. I mean, we're already spending the money, and that money, if it's supposed to be meant for educating children, not for propping up an institution, it should follow the child to wherever they're getting an education. And I'm glad that more and more families are supportive of this idea of funding students directly more than ever. It's the one silver lining of the past year, that people are fired up against the system, and they're starting to realize it doesn't make any sense to fund these buildings, particularly when they were closed for over a year, when the money can go directly to the family instead, just like we do with Pell Grants and the GI Bill for higher education. The student can take the money to a public or private, religious or non-religious university. We do the same thing with pre-K programs. Same thing with things like food stamps and Medicaid, where the money goes to the family and then they can choose the provider. We should do the same thing with K-12 education. I think that's starting to click for more and more people.
Well, particularly when you look at lower, socioeconomic families and school-age children. I mean, the case made for school choice, is loud and clear. Getting denied a good education and failing inner-city schools is, reason enough for parents, guardians, and families to say, hey, why does my kid not have equal access? A lot of talk about equality these days. Why do they not have equal access to go to a school that best fits their need? Yet they're told to sit in the corner by the same people who are promoting these ideas of equity within our system. It's kind of a kind of hypocritical of many of these teacher unions and others that sit on the left side of this political scale when they say, hey, we're for this, that, and the other, but when it comes to your kids' education, be quiet. We know what's best for you.
Yeah, the inequities entrenched in the current system, the traditional system, are a huge injustice, and giving the money directly to the families would lead to more equity. Look, advantaged families are already more likely to have school choice in the form of living by a better public school, and so they'd be residentially assigned to the best public schools. They're more likely to be able to afford private school tuition and fees. We're already spending the money. You might as well give it to the families, and then you'd allow more families to have educational options. That would lead to more equity. It would lead to more competition. It would lead to more choices and freedom on the part of the families. It's a win-win-win-win-win situation until you start to think about the teachers union bosses who would get that money regardless of your choice. Just imagine if we residentially assigned low-income families and forced them to spend that money on food stamps at residentially assigned government-run grocery stores. That would be an absolute injustice. Even if you're for or against food stamps, I think we can all agree that if we're going to spend the money through the tax system, it should go to people. It shouldn't go to a residentially assigned government-run building and bureaucracy. Instead, we should allow people to have some choice like we do with all these other programs. And you're right, it does show the hypocrisy and inconsistency from the other side, particularly when it comes to people who vote against school choice. They typically support all these other programs where people have a choice in where they spend their taxpayer-funded initiatives like Medicaid, like food stamps, like Pell Grants. The money goes to the person, not the building. Let's do the same thing with K-12 education. The problem is special interest groups profit from getting children's education dollars, so they fight really hard and influence politicians to try to protect that racket they have going.
Corey, what kind of money are the teacher unions throwing behind this idea of critical race theory in support of it and to put a positive spin on it as parents and others speak out in local districts all throughout the country in opposition to it?
Yeah, the National Education Association, those business items, it's the largest teachers union in the U.S., which also happens to be the largest labor union, period, in the United States. They approved business items that amount to $127,000 for doing just research on critical race theory, and then the opposition research is about $56,000, so it totals to be about $180,000 in total. That's just for 1 year. Who knows how much it's going to be going forward. And then the American Federation of Teachers, the second largest teachers union, just announced yesterday at their annual meeting that they're going to dedicate $2.5 million to a legal fund to defend teachers who want to teach critical race theory. So this is about a 25% increase in their legal fee budget from $10 million to $12.5 million, and 2.5 of that being allocated towards this type of defense of critical race theory in public schools. So, and it's kind of funny that the unions on the one hand and people in the media have been saying, we don't teach critical race theory in schools. That's a law school thing. But then you have the NEA and the AFT, the two biggest unions, taking actions to protect teachers advocating for critical race theory in schools or teaching critical race theory in schools. So I think that's probably part of the reason why the largest teachers union, the NEA, scrubbed their website and took those business items down, because it kind of blew up in their face.
Corey DeAngelis with us from the Reason Foundation, the Cato Institute. He lives and breathes school choice and education-related issues. Quickly, Corey, before I let you go, when we talk about CRT, what are we missing here as far as this theory that a lot of people are upset about? Given the fact that wars have been fought, millions of lives have been lost, we've gone through some very tumultuous times in our nation's history to move forward. Yet it seems like we just keep getting pulled back, like Michael Corleone in The Third Godfather. I'm trying to get out, and they keep bringing me back in to a conversation that should be focused on the future and how we can move forward based on our similarities and not necessarily our differences, and even to right some wrongs or work towards the betterment of all, of course. Yet somehow, some way, it's still in some people's minds, it feels like it's 1865 or 1965.
Yeah, I mean, this is why a lot of people are upset about what's going on in the public school system. I will say it's hard to prove, a lot of what's going on, and so we only see it come out when parents capture very egregious examples of things happening in the schools, but it shouldn't have to get that bad, right? And families shouldn't have to prove that things are not right in the schools for things to change. So I think the better solution is to fund the student directly. If your kid is at a school where you feel like they're being indoctrinated or they're learning things that are not aligned with your values, you should be able to say, okay, well, you go ahead and do that, but I'm going to send my child over here to another school that does align with my values, maybe a private or charter school, or maybe I want to do the homeschooling option. So I think the best solution here is an education savings account. We spend about, $15,000, $16,000 per child per year in the United States. Give that money to the family. And then I think what you would see is the public schools would start to change their game organically. They'd start to focus more on reading, writing, math, and math. They wouldn't focus on all these extraneous things that are really divisive and causing people to leave the system. The thing is, without school choice, you're stuck fighting about what must be taught in the school system, a one-size-fits-all system that it's not going to work for everyone. We shouldn't force everybody into the same institution where the curriculum might not be a good fit for everybody. So I think the better solution is to let us decide for our own families.
Corey DeAngelis with the Reason Foundation. The Cato Institute was in North Carolina a couple of weeks back to celebrate the state's 25th anniversary of its original charter school law. Of course, school choice has grown leaps and bounds in the Tar Heel State since then and elsewhere around the country. I would say Republicans here in North Carolina, elsewhere, have a golden opportunity to win this issue over many different demographics as it relates to educating our children. And again, I go no further than, hey, when we've got 70% of kids who are not NOT proficient in the basic fundamentals, why are we even having these conversations about very, very complicated issues that we're going to require unqualified teachers to educate our students on? It makes absolutely no sense. Corey, thanks so much for the time.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Great to have Corey DeAngelis as a friend of the program and a frequent guest on our show on a very hotly debated topic, not only here in southeastern North Carolina, but all across the nation. We're going to continue this discussion tomorrow with a mom out on the West Coast. Her name is Gabriella Clark. She's a mom who is suing her son's school district over critical race theory. According to her biracial son was forced to answer a battery of questions about his race, family, religion, and beliefs in order to determine his so-called privilege score. We'll speak with that mom tomorrow. She's based out of Nevada. We'll also hear from Paris Denard of the Republican Party in regards to CRT and all of the anti-American comments that filled up the social media feed over the 4th of July weekend. Ford O'Connell from the Sunshine State also with us tomorrow as well. Another great program planned for you, and who knows what else will break between now and then. In fact, this time tomorrow, we're going to be navigating some nasty weather with Elsa. Big disappointment of the news networks. It didn't create complete destruction in the state of Florida. News networks didn't get what they wanted with the tropical storm. Well, the system will move up here into the Carolinas tonight, and we'll be dealing with the brunt of that rainfall and wind tomorrow from the coast west of I-95 and towards the central part of the state, pretty much throughout the morning commute, around 6 a.m. until around noontime, and then we'll be out of here, and we'll breathe another sigh of relief until the next tropical system starts to make its way towards us. Hope you enjoyed the program here this morning. As always, you can contact us through our Facebook page, email, our call-in number live during the program, 910-299-7535. That'll do it for the Wednesday edition of the program. Hope you have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Keeping Ocean Isle informed. The Big Talker 106.7 FM WFBT.